The moment Emma Carter's tire exploded on that dark Chicago highway, her entire world shattered. Trapped upside down in twisted metal, gasoline pooling beneath her broken body, she never imagined the man who pulled her from death's grip would be far more dangerous than the crash itself. Lorenzo Vieri didn't save her out of kindness. He saved her because someone powerful wanted her dead, and he needed to know why. Now, imprisoned in a world of violence and secrets, Emma must survive not just her enemies, but the terrifying pull toward the man who holds her captive. If you're ready for a story of survival, danger, and impossible choices, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The headlights cutting through the darkness were the only thing keeping Emma Carter awake. Her hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled desperation, her eyes burning from exhaustion that went bone deep. The digital clock on the dashboard read 2:47 a.m., and Emma had been awake for nearly 20 hours straight. Her scrub still smelled like antiseptic and sick children, reminders of another brutal shift at Chicago Memorial's pediatric ICU. She should have stayed in the on-call room, should have taken Dr. Patel up on his offer to crash in the residence lounge, should have done a lot of things differently. But Dylan's text message still glowed in her memory. Need to talk. It's important. Her younger brother never said things were important unless they actually were, which usually meant he was in some kind of trouble. At 22, Dylan had a talent for finding problems, and an even greater talent for minimizing them until they exploded in his face. The highway stretched empty before her, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the industrial outskirts of Chicago. This route shaved 15 minutes off her commute, though she rarely took it this late. The darkness here felt heavier somehow, pressing against the windows of her beat-up Honda Civic like something alive. Emma fumbled for her coffee cup, finding it empty. She'd drained it an hour ago. Almost home, she whispered to herself, a mantra against the exhaustion threatening to pull her eyelids shut. 10 more minutes. You can do 10 more minutes. The road curved ahead, following the edge of a steep embankment that dropped into thick woods below. Emma had driven this stretch hundreds of times, knew every turn and pothole. Her body moved on autopilot, hands adjusting the wheel, foot easing off the gas as she approached the curve. That's when the explosion came. The sound was deafening, a violent bang that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The steering wheel jerked violently to the right, nearly ripping itself from Emma's hands. Her coffee cup flew from the center console, slamming into the passenger window. No, no, no! The car swerved wildly. Emma's training kicked in. She'd taken a defensive driving course years ago, back when she could afford such things. Don't slam the brakes. Steer into the skid. Stay calm. But the car wasn't responding. It was pulling hard to the right toward the embankment, and no amount of countersteering was bringing it back. Through the window, Emma caught a flash of shredded rubber. Her front tire had completely blown out. The guardrail appeared in her headlights, coming up fast. Too fast. Emma's foot found the brake pedal, pressing down hard despite everything she knew about proper technique. The car shuddered, skidding sideways across both lanes. The guardrail was right there, 10 feet away, then 5, then impact. Metal screamed against metal. The guardrail bent, groaned, then gave way like it was made of paper. Emma felt the sickening lurch as the front of her car pitched forward into empty space. Then she was falling. The world became a chaos of motion and sound. The car tumbled down the embankment, rolling over and over. Glass shattered, metal crumpled. Emma's body was thrown against the seatbelt with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. The airbag deployed, slamming into her face in a cloud of white powder. Trees loomed in the headlights, spinning wildly. The car hit one with a bone-jarring crunch, spun, then hit another. Each impact sent fresh waves of pain through Emma's body, her ribs, her shoulder, her head connecting with something hard despite the airbag. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, the car came to rest. Everything was upside down. Emma hung suspended by her seatbelt, the world inverted around her. Blood was running from somewhere on her head, dripping upward, no, downward, onto the car's ceiling below her. The deflated airbag hung like a shroud, blocking most of her view. Pain radiated through her entire body, sharp and insistent. Her right arm wouldn't move properly. Something was wrong with her ribs. Each breath sent knives of agony through her chest. "Help," she tried to say, but it came out as barely a whisper. The smell hit her then, sharp, chemical, Unmistakable. Gasoline. Panic surged through Emma's exhausted body, bringing with it a sudden, terrible clarity. She could hear it now, the steady drip, drip, drip of fuel leaking from the ruptured tank. The car's engine was still ticking, hot metal cooling in the night air. She had to get out. Had to move. Emma's hands fumbled for the seatbelt release, fingers shaking so badly she could barely grip it. Her left hand worked better than her right. She was pretty sure her right shoulder was dislocated, the pain there a constant grinding presence. The seatbelt wouldn't release. "Come on," Emma gasped, pressing the button again and again. Nothing happened. The mechanism must have jammed in the crash or bent, or it didn't matter why. What mattered was that she was trapped upside down in a wrecked car that smelled like a gas station, and any second now. A groan of metal made Emma freeze. The car was settling, shifting slightly. Through the shattered windshield, she could see nothing but darkness and trees. The headlights had died at some point during the roll, leaving her in almost complete blackness. How far had she fallen? 50 feet? 100? And how far from the road? "Help!" Emma screamed, or tried to. Her voice cracked, came out thin and weak. "Somebody help me!" The woods swallowed her voice without echo. Emma's phone. Where was her phone? She twisted as much as the seatbelt allowed, pain screaming through her ribs. There. She could see it, just barely, lying on the ceiling-turned floor of the car, its screen cracked but still glowing faintly. It was less than 2 feet away. It might as well have been on the moon. Emma stretched, fingertips brushing the edge of the phone case. So close. She pushed through the pain, extending her arm until her shoulder joint ground in its socket with a sensation that made her vision go white at the edges. Her fingers closed around the phone. She had it. The phone slipped from her grasp, sliding away across the curved ceiling. Emma watched helplessly as it came to rest against the far door, completely out of reach now. A sob built in her throat. She was so tired, so impossibly tired. Every part of her body hurt, and the smell of gasoline was getting stronger, filling her lungs with every painful breath. Dylan would be waiting for her, pacing their tiny apartment, checking his phone every few minutes. When she didn't show up, he'd call. And when she didn't answer, would he even know where to look? She'd taken a different route home. No one knew she was here. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered to the darkness. To her brother, who needed her. To the patients she wouldn't be there to care for tomorrow. To herself, for all the dreams she'd never get to chase. The woods were so quiet. Just the tick of cooling metal, the drip of fuel, and her own ragged breathing. Emma's eyes drifted closed. Just for a moment. Just to rest. The sound of footsteps made them snap open again. At first, Emma thought she was hallucinating. The pain, the exhaustion, the head injury, any of those could be making her hear things that weren't there. But the footsteps continued, steady and deliberate, moving through the underbrush. Coming closer. "Hello?" Emma's voice was barely audible. "I'm here. I'm in the car." The footsteps stopped. Emma's heart hammered against her broken ribs. Had she imagined it after all? Or was someone actually out there, standing in the darkness, listening? "Please," she called out, putting every ounce of strength she had left into her voice. "I need help. I'm trapped." For a long moment, nothing. Then the footsteps resumed, faster now, moving with purpose. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the wreckage. Emma squeezed her eyes shut against the sudden brightness, then forced them open again. She had to see who it was, had to... The beam found her face, and Emma gasped. The man standing outside the car wasn't anyone she recognized. He was tall. She could tell even from her inverted position, with dark hair and a face that the flashlight rendered in sharp planes of light and shadow. He wore an expensive-looking coat, completely wrong for hiking through the woods in the middle of the night. But it was his eyes that caught her. Even through the shattered windshield, even in the uncertain light, there was something in his gaze that made Emma's breath catch. Not concern exactly, more like assessment, like he was calculating something. "You're alive," he said. His voice was deep, with the faintest trace of an accent Emma couldn't place. He made it sound like a fact requiring confirmation rather than a relief. "The car might catch fire," Emma managed. "The fuel line's broken. I can smell..." "I know." He moved closer, glass crunching under his shoes. Designer shoes, Emma noticed distantly. Completely impractical for a rescue in the woods. How badly are you hurt? I don't know. My shoulder, my ribs. I can't feel my right arm properly. The seatbelt's jammed and I can't get out. The man crouched down, bringing himself level with the wreckage. This close, Emma could see more details. He was probably in his mid-30s, with features that were striking rather than traditionally handsome. Strong jaw, straight nose, a mouth set in a hard line. But it was still his eyes that held her, dark, intense, and completely unreadable. What's your name? He asked. Emma. Emma Carter, please. You have to… Emma Carter, he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. I'm going to get you out, but I need you to stay very still. Can you do that? Emma nodded, then winced as the movement sent fresh pain through her neck. The man disappeared from view. Emma heard him moving around the car, the sound of his footsteps on broken glass. Then he was back, this time approaching from the driver's side door. The door's jammed, he said, his voice clinical. I'll have to cut the seatbelt. There's going to be a drop when it releases. I'll catch you, but it may hurt. Okay, Emma whispered. Anything was better than staying trapped. The man reached in through the broken window. Emma caught a glimpse of his hands, strong, with calluses that didn't match his expensive clothes. He was holding a knife, the blade gleaming in the flashlight's glow. Not a Swiss Army knife or a rescue tool, a real knife. The kind someone carried for reasons that had nothing to do with opening packages. Ready? He asked. Emma braced herself as much as she could. Yes. The knife moved in one smooth motion, slicing through the seatbelt like it was made of paper. Emma felt herself start to fall. And then the man's arms were around her, catching her weight, supporting her as he carefully maneuvered her out through the window. His grip was firm but surprisingly gentle, like he knew exactly where she was hurt and was avoiding those places. The moment Emma was clear of the car, he lifted her completely off the ground, cradling her against his chest. She should have protested. She was a grown woman, not a child, but her body had reached the end of its reserves. Her head fell against his shoulder, and she noticed distantly that his coat smelled like expensive cologne and something else. Gunpowder, maybe. Stay awake, Emma, the man said, his voice closer now. I need you to stay awake for me. Who are you? Emma managed. Someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. That wasn't an answer, but Emma's head was too foggy to push. The man was moving quickly through the woods, navigating the rough terrain with a sureness that suggested he could see perfectly in the dark. My brother, Emma said suddenly. Dylan. He's waiting for me. I need to tell him I'm okay. Later, the man said. Right now, you need medical attention. Emma tried to focus on her surroundings. They were climbing now, heading up the embankment toward the road. How was he doing this? She wasn't a small woman, and the slope was steep, but he was moving like she weighed nothing. Your car, Emma said, spotting a vehicle parked on the shoulder of the road. Not just any vehicle. A black SUV that probably cost more than she made in a year. You were just driving by. Something like that. He reached the SUV and somehow managed to open the back door without putting her down. The interior was all leather and luxury, and he laid her carefully across the back seat. Emma's vision was starting to blur at the edges. Shock, probably. Her medical training supplied the word even as she lost the ability to fight it. Hospital, she mumbled. Need to go to the hospital. The man leaned over her, and for a moment his face was very close to hers. In the SUV's dome light, she could finally see his eyes clearly. They were dark brown, almost black, and they were looking at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine despite the pain. No hospital, he said quietly. Not yet. You're safer with me. I don't understand. Your tire didn't just blow out, Emma. His hand brushed hair back from her face, the gesture almost tender. Someone cut through it. They wanted you to crash. The words didn't make sense. Why would anyone want her to crash? She was nobody, just a nurse trying to make ends meet, trying to take care of her brother, trying to… Stay with me, the man said sharply, and Emma realized her eyes had drifted closed again. She forced them open, met his gaze. Who are you? A slight smile touched his lips, but there was no humor in it. My name is Lorenzo Vieri, and whether you know it or not, Emma Carter, your life has been in danger for a very long time. The SUV door closed, sealing her in. Through the tinted window, Emma watched Lorenzo walk around to the driver's side. His movements were economical, controlled. This was a man used to being in control. The engine started with a purr of expensive machinery. Lorenzo pulled onto the highway, but he didn't turn toward the city. Instead, he headed in the opposite direction, away from Chicago's lights, into the darkness. Emma knew she should be afraid. Should be demanding he take her to a hospital. Should be reaching for her phone. Where was her phone? Should be doing something other than lying here while a complete stranger drove her to an unknown destination. But the exhaustion and pain were overwhelming everything else. And there was something about Lorenzo Vieri's certainty, his absolute confidence that he was doing the right thing, that made her want to believe him. My brother, she whispered one more time. I'll make sure he knows you're safe, Lorenzo said, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. You have my word. Emma wanted to ask what his word was worth, wanted to ask 100 other questions, but consciousness was slipping away from her like water through her fingers. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Lorenzo's eyes in the mirror, watching her with an expression she couldn't read, an expression that somehow managed to be both protective and possessive at the same time. When Emma woke, the first thing she noticed was the absence of pain. Not complete absence. Her body still ached, and her shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. But the sharp, overwhelming agony from before had been muted to something manageable. Medication. Someone had given her medication. The second thing she noticed was the ceiling. It was beautiful. Ornate crown molding, framed panels of cream-colored plaster, and from the center hung a chandelier that caught the morning light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the room. This was not a hospital. Emma tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her ribs protested sharply, and her right arm was bound to her chest in a professional-looking sling. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The voice came from somewhere to her left. Emma turned her head carefully and found Lorenzo Vieri sitting in an armchair beside the bed. He was still wearing the same clothes from last night, or what she assumed was last night, though his coat was gone. In the daylight streaming through tall windows, he looked different, younger, maybe, though no less dangerous. Where am I? Emma's voice came out rough, her throat dry. Lorenzo stood and crossed to a side table, pouring water from a crystal pitcher into a glass. He approached the bed and held it to her lips, his free hand supporting the back of her head with surprising gentleness. Emma drank gratefully, then pulled back. Where am I? She asked again. My home, Lorenzo said simply. He set the glass on the nightstand and returned to his chair. About 40 miles outside Chicago. You brought me to your house. Emma looked around the room again, taking in the details. Expensive furniture, original artwork on the walls, a door that she suspected led to a private bathroom. Instead of a hospital. Yes. Why? Because the people who tried to kill you last night will be watching the hospitals, Lorenzo said, his tone matter of fact. Along with the police stations, your apartment, and anywhere else you might reasonably go. The words hung in the air between them. Emma's medical training screamed at her that she should be in a hospital, getting x-rays and CT scans, being properly evaluated. But another part of her, the part that had learned to trust her instincts during long nights in the ICU, was telling her that Lorenzo was right. You said someone cut my tire, Emma said slowly, that they wanted me to crash. Yes. Who? Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, regarding her with those unreadable dark eyes. That's what I'm trying to determine. But I have some theories. And you think they'd try again, at a hospital? I know they would. Lorenzo's certainty was absolute. Which is why you were treated here instead. Treated by who? Emma glanced down at herself for the first time. She was wearing a soft nightgown she'd never seen before, and beneath it she could feel bandages on her ribs. Professional bandages properly applied. I have a doctor on staff, Lorenzo said. He examined you last night while you were sedated. 3 cracked ribs, dislocated shoulder, already relocated, multiple contusions, and a mild concussion. You were very lucky. Lucky. Emma almost laughed at the word. I need to call my brother. He'll be worried sick. Already taken care of. Lorenzo pulled out a phone, her phone, Emma realized with a start. I sent him a message from your number this morning, telling him you picked up an extra shift and would be out of touch for a few days. You had no right. I had every right, Lorenzo interrupted, his voice sharp. Because if your brother tries to find you, he becomes a target too. Is that what you want? Emma's mouth snapped shut. Dylan. She'd been so focused on her own situation that she hadn't thought about how this might affect her brother. I want to understand what's happening, she said finally. You say someone tried to kill me. Why? I'm nobody. I'm just a nurse. I don't have any money. I don't know any secrets. Your father, Lorenzo said quietly. Did he ever tell you about his debts? The question hit Emma like a physical blow. My father's been dead for 3 years. I know. I'm sorry for your loss. Lorenzo's expression softened slightly. But some debts don't die with the person who incurred them. Emma felt her stomach drop. Her father, she'd barely thought about him in years. He'd been gone from her life long before his actual death, disappearing into a bottle and a series of bad decisions that had eventually killed him. What kind of debts? She asked, though part of her didn't want to know. The kind you make with very dangerous people, Lorenzo said. The kind that transfer to family members when the original debtor can't pay. That's insane. I'm not responsible for... The law doesn't matter to people like this, Lorenzo cut her off. What matters is that your father borrowed money, a lot of money, and died before repaying it, which means they see you and your brother as collateral. Emma's mind was racing. This couldn't be real. Her father had been a drunk and a failure, but he'd never mentioned anything about loans from dangerous people. He'd barely mentioned anything at all during the last years of his life. Who are they? She demanded. Lorenzo's expression grew even more serious. A criminal organization, led by a man named Viktor Kozlov, Russian, ruthless, and very, very patient. The name meant nothing to Emma, but the way Lorenzo said it, with a mixture of contempt and respect, told her everything she needed to know. How do you know all this? Emma asked. Who are you, really? For a long moment, Lorenzo didn't answer. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over what Emma could now see were extensive grounds. Manicured gardens, a fountain, trees that had probably cost more to plant than her car was worth. I'm someone who exists in the same world as Viktor Kozlov, he said finally. Someone who knows how he operates, and someone who has the resources to keep you safe. It wasn't a direct answer, but Emma understood what he was implying. Lorenzo Vieri wasn't just wealthy. He was part of something larger, something organized, something criminal. You're a mobster, Emma said flatly. Lorenzo turned from the window, and for the first time she saw something like amusement in his eyes. Such an outdated term. I prefer to think of myself as a businessman. A businessman who just happens to know all about Russian criminal organizations and has a doctor on staff to treat car crash victims in the middle of the night. Among other things, Lorenzo returned to his chair. The specifics of my business dealings aren't important right now. What's important is that you understand your situation. Victor wants you dead, or worse. He's already made one attempt. There will be others. So I'm supposed to just stay here? Hide in your house while some Russian gangster hunts me? Not just you, your brother too. I'm having him collected as we speak. Emma sat up despite the pain, adrenaline cutting through the medication. Collected? What does that mean? If you hurt him, I'm bringing him here, where he'll be safe, Lorenzo said calmly. Voluntarily. My people are explaining the situation to him right now. He'll want to see you anyway, to verify you're alive. This is kidnapping. This is survival, Lorenzo said, his voice hardening. You can call it whatever you want, but here are the facts. Someone tried to kill you last night. They'll try again. And unless you want your brother to end up like you, or worse, you'll accept my protection. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to take his protection and shove it, wanted to demand he let her go. But she couldn't. Because as crazy as this all sounded, as impossible as it seemed, Lorenzo was right. Someone had tried to kill her. The tire hadn't just blown. It had been cut. And if Viktor Kozlov really was after her for her father's debts, how much? Emma asked quietly. How much did my father owe? $300,000, Lorenzo said, plus interest. By now, probably close to $500,000. The number was so absurd that Emma almost laughed. $500,000. She didn't make that much in 10 years of nursing, would never make that much in her entire life. I can't pay that, she said numbly. I know. So what happens? I just hide here forever? Dylan and I spend the rest of our lives running from these people? No, Lorenzo said. We find another solution. What solution? Lorenzo stood, buttoning his jacket in a gesture that somehow managed to be both casual and final. That's what I'm working on. In the meantime, you recover. You stay safe, and you trust that I know what I'm doing. He moved toward the door, and Emma felt a sudden panic at the thought of being left alone. Wait, she called out. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. So why risk yourself for someone like me? Lorenzo paused with his hand on the door handle. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he turned back, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Let's just say I have my reasons, he said quietly. Get some rest, Emma. The doctor will check on you this afternoon. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Emma sat in the enormous bed, in the beautiful room, in a mansion owned by a man who was definitely some kind of criminal, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Her father had owed money to a Russian mobster. Someone had tried to kill her because of that debt. Lorenzo Vieri, whoever he really was, had saved her life and brought her here. And Dylan was being collected. Emma reached for the phone Lorenzo had left on the nightstand, but it was locked. Of course it was. She was a prisoner here, no matter how gilded the cage. A knock on the door made her jump. Yes? She called out. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit that suggested she was staff of some kind. Good morning, Miss Carter, the woman said with a warm smile. I'm Maria. Mr. Vieri asked me to see if you needed anything. I need to see my brother, Emma said immediately. And I need my own phone. And I need... Your brother will be here within the hour, Maria interrupted gently. As for your phone, I'm afraid that's not possible. For security reasons. But is there anything else I can get you? Are you hungry? The doctor left instructions about your diet, but I can make almost anything you'd like. Emma's stomach chose that moment to growl, reminding her she hadn't eaten since before her shift yesterday. Toast, she said finally. And tea, if you have it. Of course. I'll bring up a tray. Maria hesitated at the door. Miss Carter, I know this must all seem very strange, but Mr. Vieri, he's a good man. Whatever else he is, whatever you may think of him, he wouldn't have brought you here if he didn't intend to keep you safe. Before Emma could respond, Maria was gone. A good man. Emma almost laughed at the description. Lorenzo Vieri might be many things, but good seemed like a stretch for someone who lived like this, who had a doctor on staff to patch up car crash victims, who existed in the same world as Russian criminals. But he had saved her life, and he was protecting Dylan. For now, that would have to be enough. Emma lay back against the pillows, ignoring the protest from her ribs, and stared at the chandelier above her. Somewhere in this house was a man who might be a criminal. Somewhere out there was another man who definitely was, and who wanted her dead. And here she was, caught between them, with nothing but the word of a stranger that she would survive this. The morning light streaming through the windows seemed to mock her with its beauty. What good was sunlight when you were trapped? What good was safety when it came in the form of a cage? Emma closed her eyes and tried not to think about how dramatically her life had changed in the space of a single night. Tried not to think about how there was no going back to the person she'd been before the crash. That Emma Carter, the tired nurse, the struggling sister, the woman just trying to survive, was gone. What would replace her, she had no idea. But she had a feeling she was about to find out. Dylan arrived exactly 53 minutes later, and Emma heard him before she saw him. Where is she? Emma! Emma! His voice echoed through the halls of Lorenzo's mansion, raw with panic and anger. Emma pushed herself upright despite the sharp protest from her ribs, her heart hammering against her chest. She'd barely made it to the edge of the bed when her door flew open. Dylan stood in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wild. At 22, he still had traces of the boy she'd raised after their mother died. The same unruly brown hair, the same stubborn jaw. But right now, he looked older than his years, aged by fear. Em? His voice cracked on her name. I'm okay, Emma said quickly, holding out her good arm. Dylan, I'm okay. He crossed the room in 3 strides and threw his arms around her, careful even in his panic not to squeeze too hard. Emma felt him shaking against her, felt the wetness of tears against her neck. They said you crashed, he whispered. They said someone tried to kill you. I thought, when I didn't hear from you, I thought, I know, I'm sorry. Emma pulled back enough to look at him, her own eyes stinging. But I'm alive. We're both alive. That's what matters. What the hell is going on? Dylan's fear was rapidly transforming into anger. Who are these people? The guy who brought me here, Marco, or whatever. He wouldn't tell me anything except that you were in danger and I needed to come with him. Now. It's complicated, Emma started, but Dylan cut her off. Complicated? I got grabbed off the street by 2 men in suits and thrown into an SUV. They wouldn't let me call anyone, wouldn't let me take anything from the apartment. Just kept saying you were alive and I'd understand when I got here. He looked around the opulent room, his expression hardening. What kind of trouble are you in? The kind I didn't ask for, Emma said quietly. And the kind that involves you too. Before Dylan could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Lorenzo stepped inside without waiting for permission, his presence somehow filling the room despite his controlled movements. Mr. Carter, he said, nodding to Dylan. I'm glad you arrived safely. Dylan moved in front of Emma, his body language protective despite the fact that he was several inches shorter than Lorenzo and probably 50 pounds lighter. Who the hell are you, and what gives you the right to kidnap us? Dylan? Emma started, but Lorenzo held up a hand. Your sister didn't tell you? He looked at Emma with something that might have been amusement. I thought you'd want to explain. I was waiting for you, Emma said pointedly, since this is apparently your show. Lorenzo's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. He moved to the sitting area by the window and settled into one of the chairs with the casual grace of someone completely comfortable in his own domain. Please sit, he said, gesturing to the other chairs. This conversation will be easier if we're all calm. I'm not sitting down with, Dylan began, but Emma touched his arm. Dylan, please. Her brother's jaw worked, but he helped her to the nearest chair before taking a position standing behind her, one hand on her shoulder. A united front. Lorenzo watched this display with those dark, assessing eyes, then began speaking in the same matter-of-fact tone he'd used with Emma earlier. Your father, Thomas Carter, borrowed $300,000 from a man named Victor Kozlov approximately 5 years ago. The terms of the loan were unfavorable. High interest, short repayment window, severe penalties for default. Dylan's hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. Dad never mentioned any loan. I imagine there were many things your father didn't mention, Lorenzo said. Not unkindly, but without softening the truth. When he died 3 years ago, the debt was transferred to his next of kin, you and your sister. That's not legal, Dylan protested. You can't just transfer debt to family members. In the world Viktor Kozlov operates in, legality is irrelevant. Lorenzo leaned forward slightly. He sees you as collateral, assets to be collected or eliminated depending on which serves his purposes better. Emma felt Dylan's hand start to shake. She reached up and covered it with her own, a gesture of comfort they'd shared since childhood. So the crash, Dylan said slowly, that wasn't an accident. No, someone cut through your sister's tire knowing that section of highway. Knowing she'd be exhausted after her shift, knowing the embankment. Lorenzo's voice remained steady, but Emma caught something underneath it, anger, carefully controlled. It was meant to look like an accident, a tragic loss, and if it had worked, you would have been next. Why? Dylan demanded. Why kill us? If we're collateral, wouldn't we be worth more alive? Not necessarily. Lorenzo stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Victor is making an example. He wants other debtors to see what happens when loans aren't repaid. Your deaths would send a message. Emma's mind was racing, medical training warring with the surreal nature of this conversation. How do you know all this? How do you know Victor's plans? Lorenzo turned from the window, and for the first time, Emma saw something almost like respect in his expression when he looked at her. Because Victor and I exist in the same professional circles. We're competitors, you might say. and I make it my business to know what my competitors are planning. You're a criminal, Dylan said flatly. I'm a businessman who operates outside traditional legal frameworks, Lorenzo corrected. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Then you're fortunate you're not standing in my position. Lorenzo's voice took on an edge. Because if you were, you'd understand that sometimes the difference between life and death comes down to who's willing to act when the law won't protect you. The room fell silent. Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the tension radiating from her brother. Outside the window, she could see guards. She recognized them now for what they were, patrolling the grounds. What happens now? She asked quietly. We can't stay here forever. No, Lorenzo agreed. But you'll stay here until I've dealt with Victor. Dealt with him how? Dylan asked. Lorenzo's smile was cold. That's not something you need to concern yourself with. The hell it isn't. You're talking about our lives. I'm talking about keeping you alive, Lorenzo interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut, which is more than you'd be capable of doing on your own. Victor has resources, connections, people everywhere. If you walked out of here right now, you'd be dead within 48 hours, both of you. Emma believed him. She could see it in his eyes. This wasn't a threat or an exaggeration. It was simply fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who knew exactly how this world worked. So we're prisoners, she said. You're protected, Lorenzo corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Emma met his gaze steadily. Because from where I'm sitting, we have no choice in the matter. We can't leave, can't contact anyone, can't live our own lives. That sounds like a prison to me, no matter how nice the accommodations. Something flickered in Lorenzo's expression, surprise maybe, or recognition, like he hadn't expected her to challenge him so directly. You're right, he said after a moment. You don't have a choice, not in the broader situation. Victor wants you dead, and that's not going to change, but you do have a choice in how you respond to that reality. What does that mean? Dylan asked suspiciously. It means you can fight me every step of the way, make this harder than it needs to be, and potentially get yourselves killed in the process. Or you can work with me, trust that I know what I'm doing, and give yourselves the best chance of survival. Lorenzo's gaze moved between them. I've kept people safe from Victor before. I can do it again, but only if you let me. Emma looked up at her brother. Dylan's face was a war of emotions, fear, anger, distrust, and underneath it all, the same helpless recognition she felt. They were in over their heads, way over. What about our lives? Emma asked. My job at the hospital, Dylan's classes, our apartment. We can't just disappear. Your job has already been informed that you're taking emergency leave for a family matter, Lorenzo said. Paid leave, incidentally. Dylan's professors have received similar notification. Your apartment is being maintained. To the outside world, you've gone to care for a sick relative out of state. You've thought of everything, Emma said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. That's what I do. Lorenzo moved toward the door, then paused. Maria will show you to your room, Mr. Carter. It's next to your sister's. You'll find clothes and anything else you might need already there. How long? Dylan asked. How long do we have to stay? As long as it takes. Lorenzo's hand was on the door handle. I suggest you both get some rest. We'll talk more tonight at dinner. He left before either of them could respond, the door closing with a quiet finality. For a long moment, Emma and Dylan just sat there, the weight of their new reality settling over them like a shroud. This is insane, Dylan finally said. Completely insane. I know. We should go to the police, tell them everything. And tell them what? Emma looked up at him. That a Russian mobster is trying to collect on our dead father's debt? They'd think we were crazy. And even if they believed us, what could they do? Put us in protective custody? For how long? Forever? Dylan's jaw worked. So we just stay here? Trust a complete stranger who's probably just as dangerous as the people trying to kill us? Do we have a better option? The question hung between them, unanswered because they both knew the truth. They didn't have a better option. They barely had any option at all. Dylan pulled another chair over and sat down heavily, his head in his hands. This is my fault. What? No. If I hadn't texted you last night, you would have stayed at the hospital. You wouldn't have been on that road, wouldn't have... Dylan? Emma waited until he looked up at her. This isn't your fault. It's not mine either. It's Dad's and Victor's and maybe even Lorenzo's for getting involved. But it's not ours. We didn't choose this. Then why does it feel like I'm drowning? Dylan's voice cracked. Like everything's falling apart and I can't stop it? Emma reached out and took his hand, squeezing hard despite the pull on her injured shoulder. Because we are drowning, but we're doing it together, like always. Dylan's answering smile was weak, but it was there. Team Carter against the world? Something like that. A soft knock interrupted them. Maria appeared in the doorway, her expression sympathetic. Mr. Carter? If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your room. You must be exhausted. Dylan looked at Emma. Will you be okay? I'll be fine. Go. Get some rest. She managed what she hoped was a reassuring smile. We'll figure this out. After Dylan left, Emma remained in the chair, staring at the closed door. The medication was wearing off, and pain was creeping back into her awareness. Ribs, shoulder, the deep ache in her head where she'd hit something during the crash. But physical pain was something she understood, something she could manage. It was the other kind of pain, the fear, the uncertainty, the sense of her life spinning completely out of control that threatened to overwhelm her. A soft knock made her look up. Lorenzo stood in the doorway again, and Emma wondered how long he'd been there. I thought you'd left, she said. I came back. He stepped inside, carrying a small bottle and a glass of water. The doctor said you'd need more pain medication around now. Emma wanted to refuse on principle, but the throbbing in her ribs convinced her otherwise. She took the pills he offered and swallowed them dry before accepting the water. Thank you, she said grudgingly. Lorenzo pulled up the chair Dylan had vacated. Up close, in the afternoon light, Emma could see details she'd missed before. A thin scar along his jawline, slight shadows under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. The way his hands, resting on his knees, bore calluses that spoke of violence, even if his suit spoke of wealth. You handled that well, he said. With your brother. I've been handling Dylan since I was 19 years old. I'm good at it. 19, Lorenzo repeated. That's when your mother died? How do you know that? I know everything about you, Emma Carter. He said it without arrogance, just fact. Your mother died of cancer when you were 19 and Dylan was 15. Your father spiraled afterward, drinking himself to death over the next 3 years. You dropped out of college to work full-time, put Dylan through high school, eventually scraped together enough money to finish your nursing degree at night school. You've been working at Chicago Memorial for 18 months. You're well-liked by your colleagues, excellent with patients, and you've been passed over for promotion twice because you don't play politics well. Emma felt exposed, like he'd peeled back her skin and examined what was underneath. You had me investigated. Of course I did. I needed to know who I was saving. Why? The question burst out of her. Why did you save me? You still haven't really answered that. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. Your father's debt to Victor, it's complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated. True. A slight smile touched his lips. But this particular complication involves me. Emma waited, her heart rate picking up. Whatever he was about to say, she had a feeling it would change everything. The money your father borrowed, Lorenzo continued, it was actually my money, not Victor's. The words didn't make sense at first. Emma's pain medication-fogged brain struggled to process them. What? 5 years ago, I loaned money to several people through intermediaries. Your father was one of them. He was supposed to repay me. Lorenzo's expression hardened. Instead, he sold his debt to Victor for pennies on the dollar. Needed quick cash for one last gamble. Victor bought it knowing exactly what he was getting, leverage over me. I don't understand. How is my father's debt leverage over you? Because Victor knows I don't like collateral damage, knows I have... Lorenzo paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Certain principles about who gets hurt in business disputes. By going after you and your brother, he's forcing my hand. Either I let innocents die, which damages my reputation, or I intervene, which shows weakness. Emma's head was spinning, and not just from the medication. So this whole thing, the crash, bringing us here, protecting us, it's all about your reputation? Your war with Victor? No. Lorenzo leaned forward, his gaze intense. It started that way. When I learned Victor had purchased your father's debt and was planning to collect it permanently, I started watching you, making sure he didn't move too quickly. Last night, when my people reported someone tampering with your car, I came myself. Why? Because somewhere between learning your name and pulling you from that wreck, this stopped being about business. Lorenzo's voice dropped lower. You're not collateral to me, Emma. You're not leverage or a political move or a way to win against Victor. You're a woman who deserved better than the hand life dealt her. And I can give you that. The intensity in his eyes made Emma's breath catch. This wasn't the cold, controlled businessman who'd explained her father's debts. This was something rawer, more dangerous. I don't need to be saved, Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. Everyone needs to be saved sometimes. Lorenzo stood, putting distance between them. Dinner is at 7. Maria will help you dress if your injuries make it difficult. He was at the door when Emma called out, Lorenzo? He turned back. Thank you, she said quietly, for pulling me from the car. Whatever your reasons, you saved my life. So, thank you. Something softened in his expression. You're welcome. After he left, Emma sat in the gathering afternoon shadows and tried to make sense of everything. Her father had borrowed money from Lorenzo, then sold the debt to Victor. Victor was using her and Dylan as weapons against Lorenzo. And Lorenzo had appointed himself their protector for reasons that seemed to shift between business strategy and something much more personal. It was a mess, a dangerous, complicated mess that she and Dylan were stuck in the middle of. But as Emma made her way back to the bed, exhaustion finally overwhelming everything else, she couldn't help thinking about the way Lorenzo had looked at her when he said she wasn't collateral, like she was something valuable, something worth protecting, not because of strategy or reputation, but because of who she was. Emma closed her eyes and let the medication pull her under, her last conscious thought wondering when her life had become the kind of story she'd never believed could be real. The next few days passed in a strange haze. Emma's injuries healed slowly. Her ribs ached with every breath. Her shoulder protested any movement, and the concussion left her with headaches that came and went like tides. But Lorenzo's doctor, a quiet man named Dr. Chen, who asked no questions and offered no judgments, monitored her recovery with professional efficiency. Dylan adapted to their captivity better than Emma expected. Or perhaps he was just hiding his fear better. He explored the mansion like it was a museum, cataloging every room and corridor, every guard position and exit point. Emma knew what he was doing, mapping escape routes they'd probably never use. Lorenzo was often absent, disappearing for hours or even full days to handle what Maria vaguely referred to as business. But when he was present, he joined them for dinner in an enormous dining room that could have seated 30, but held only the 3 of them. It was during one of these dinners, 4 days after the crash, that everything shifted. I have news about Victor, Lorenzo said, setting down his wine glass. He's planning something. My sources indicate he's moving assets, calling in favors, building towards something big. Dylan's fork clattered against his plate. What does that mean for us? It means we're running out of time. Lorenzo's gaze moved to Emma. I need to act soon, before he does. Act how? Emma asked, though part of her didn't want to know. That's not something I can discuss. Bullshit. The word came out before Emma could stop it. You don't get to keep us here. Tell us we're in danger, and then refuse to explain what you're planning. We deserve to know. Lorenzo's expression hardened. Some things are better left unknown. Is that what you tell yourself? Emma pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. That keeping us in the dark is for our own good? Emma, Dylan started, but she cut him off. No, I'm tired of this. Tired of being told to trust, to wait, to let Lorenzo handle everything while we sit here like helpless children. She stood, ignoring the protest from her ribs. I'm a nurse. I deal with life and death every day. I can handle the truth. Lorenzo stood as well, his movements controlled, but his eyes flashing with something dangerous. Can you? Can you handle knowing that the truth involves violence, that people will die because of decisions I make, that your survival might cost lives? I can handle it better than being treated like I'm made of glass, Emma shot back. For a long moment, They stared at each other across the dining table, tension crackling like electricity. Dylan looked between them, his expression uncertain. Then Lorenzo smiled. Not the cold, professional smile Emma had seen before. A real smile, warm and almost surprised. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Someone grateful. Compliant. Willing to let me make all the decisions." Lorenzo moved around the table toward her. "But you're not that person, are you?" "I stopped being that person the night my mother died, and I realized no one was coming to save us," Emma said. "I learned to save myself. And yet here you are, letting me save you. I don't have much choice. Everyone has choices, Emma. You're choosing to stay, to trust me, at least partially, to not fight this as hard as you could." Lorenzo stopped a few feet away, close enough that Emma could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Why? The question hung between them. Emma knew the answer, had known it for days, but refused to acknowledge it. Because acknowledging it meant admitting something she wasn't ready to face. "Because Dylan needs this," she said finally. "Because he's safer here than anywhere else right now. And because—" She trailed off. "Because," Lorenzo prompted, his voice soft, "because I think you're telling the truth. About wanting to protect us. About this being more than business." Emma forced herself to meet his gaze. "I don't understand why, but I believe you." Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. He reached out slowly, giving Emma plenty of time to pull away, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. "Smart woman," he murmured. Emma's breath caught. She should step back, should put distance between them, should remember that this man was dangerous and complicated and everything she should avoid. But her body wasn't listening to logic. It was responding to the warmth of his touch, the intensity in his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. I'm still here," Dylan said awkwardly from the table. "And this is really weird." The spell broke. Lorenzo stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place. But his eyes remained warm when they met Emma's. "My apologies," he said, though he didn't sound particularly sorry. "I forgot myself." Emma returned to her seat, her heart racing. Across the table, Dylan was giving her a look that clearly said they'd be talking about this later. Lorenzo remained standing. "To answer your question, Emma, yes, I'm planning to confront Victor directly. End this before he can move against you again. It will be dangerous, and people will likely be hurt. But it's necessary." "When?" Emma asked. "Soon, within the week, if everything goes according to plan." "And what happens to us during this confrontation?" "You stay here, protected by my best people. If something goes wrong," Lorenzo's jaw tightened, "there are contingencies in place. Money and accounts under your names, documents that will get you out of the country if needed. You'll be taken care of." "I don't want money," Emma said quietly. "I want you to come back." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise Lorenzo. His eyes widened slightly, the first crack she'd seen in his controlled demeanor. "Why?" he asked. "Because you make me feel safe. Because you look at me like I matter. Because somewhere in the last 4 days, I've started to see past the dangerous exterior to the man underneath." "Because Dylan and I need you," Emma said instead, taking the coward's way out. "We don't know anyone else in this world you live in. If something happens to you, we're on our own." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Lorenzo seemed to know that, seemed to read the things she wasn't saying in her expression. "Then I'll make sure to come back," he said softly. "I promise you that, Emma. I'll come back." Promises from a man like Lorenzo should have meant nothing, but somehow Emma believed him. The rest of the dinner passed in subdued conversation. Dylan asked questions about security, about the guards, about protocols if something went wrong. Lorenzo answered patiently, treating Dylan's concerns with respect rather than dismissal. Watching them, Emma felt something loosen in her chest. Her brother needed this, needed a strong male figure who took him seriously, who didn't dismiss his fears or patronize him. Their father had been useless in that regard, too consumed by his own demons to notice his children drowning. After dinner, Dylan excused himself to his room, leaving Emma and Lorenzo alone in the hallway outside the dining room. "He's a good kid," Lorenzo said. "Smart, observant. He'll do well once this is over." "Once this is over," Emma repeated. You make it sound so certain. Because I am certain. Victor has made a mistake coming after you. He thinks he's found my weakness, but what he's actually done is give me a reason to end him permanently. The casual way Lorenzo spoke about ending someone's life should have frightened Emma. Should have reminded her exactly what kind of man he was. But all she could think about was that he was doing it for her. For Dylan. I should get some rest, she said, suddenly exhausted. Doctor, Chen wants me sleeping more while my ribs heal. Of course, Lorenzo gestured toward the stairs. Let me walk you. They climbed in silence, Emma moving slowly to accommodate her injuries. At her door, she paused. Thank you, she said, for dinner, for being honest with Dylan, for everything. Lorenzo reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her skin. You don't need to thank me for things I want to do. What do you want, Lorenzo? The question came out barely above a whisper. His eyes searched her face, and Emma saw a war happening behind them. Desire versus control, want versus wisdom. I want you safe, he said finally. Everything else is secondary to that. It wasn't a declaration of love or even attraction, but somehow it felt more significant than either of those things. Emma reached up and covered his hand with hers, pressing his palm against her cheek. Then be safe yourself. When you go after Victor, be careful. I'm always careful. Promise me. I already did. Lorenzo's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. At dinner, remember? I promised to come back. Promise again. A slow smile curved his lips. I promise, Emma Carter, that I will do everything in my power to return to you safely. Is that sufficient? It'll have to be. They stood there for a moment longer, hands touching, eyes locked. Then Lorenzo stepped back, putting distance between them with what looked like physical effort. Good night, Emma. Good night. Inside her room, Emma leaned against the closed door and tried to calm her racing heart. What was she doing? Getting attached to a man who lived in a world of violence? Letting herself feel things for someone who probably saw her as a responsibility, a mission to complete? But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the way Lorenzo had looked at her, like she was something more than a woman he'd saved, like she was something he wanted to keep. And despite everything, despite the danger, despite the impossibility of it all, Emma wanted that too. She wanted to be kept. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing she'd admitted to herself in years. Emma woke to the sound of shouting. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in the ICU, responding to a code. Then her ribs protested as she sat up too quickly, and reality crashed back. Lorenzo's mansion, her gilded cage, the life she was still trying to accept as real. The shouting came again, muffled by the thick door but unmistakably angry. Male voices, raised in argument. One of them was Lorenzo. Emma grabbed the robe Maria had left folded at the foot of her bed and padded to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. The voices were coming from downstairs, probably Lorenzo's study. She couldn't make out words, just the sharp cadence of disagreement. Against her better judgment, Emma eased the door open and slipped into the hallway. Her bare feet made no sound on the plush carpet as she moved toward the grand staircase. The voices grew clearer as she descended, and she recognized the second speaker now, Marco, the man who'd brought Dylan to the mansion. Absolutely insane, Marco was saying. You're walking into a trap. Victor wants you to come after him. He's counting on it. I know what Victor wants. Lorenzo's voice was controlled, but Emma could hear the steel underneath. That doesn't change what needs to happen. There are other ways. We could negotiate, offer him something else. There is nothing else. The control cracked, and Emma heard something she'd never heard from Lorenzo before. Raw emotion. He wants them dead, Marco. Emma and her brother, not as leverage, not as bargaining chips, dead, to prove a point, to humiliate me. And I will be damned if I let that happen. Emma's hand tightened on the banister. She should go back upstairs, should pretend she hadn't heard this. But her feet carried her forward until she stood in the shadows near Lorenzo's study, where the door stood partially ajar. This isn't about strategy anymore, Marco said, his voice gentler now. Is it? This is personal. A long pause. Emma held her breath. Yes, Lorenzo said finally. It's personal. Lorenzo, I've known you for 15 years. I've seen you make hard calls, sacrifice pieces to win the game. But this woman, you've known her for less than a week. You can't throw everything away for… For what? Lorenzo's voice was dangerous. For someone innocent? For someone who deserves better than to die because of her father's mistakes? Or are you about to say something even more foolish? I'm saying you're emotionally compromised, and in our world, that gets people killed. Then I'll be very careful not to get killed. Emma heard movement, footsteps approaching the door. She pressed herself against the wall, but not quickly enough. Lorenzo emerged from the study and stopped short when he saw her, his expression shifting from anger to surprise to something carefully neutral. Emma, how long have you been standing there? Long enough, she admitted. There was no point in lying. Marco appeared behind Lorenzo, his face apologetic. Miss Carter, I didn't realize… It's fine, Marco. Lorenzo's eyes never left Emma's face. Leave us. Marco hesitated, then nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Lorenzo stepped back, gesturing for Emma to enter the study. She did, her heart pounding. The room was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk that probably cost more than her nursing salary for a year. Lorenzo closed the door behind them and moved to a sideboard, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. Brandy? He offered. It's 7 in the morning. Is it? Lorenzo glanced at the window where dawn light was just beginning to creep through the heavy curtains. I've been up all night. Time loses meaning. He handed her a glass anyway. Emma took it but didn't drink, watching as Lorenzo drained half of his in one swallow. You're planning to go after Victor today, she said. Not a question. Tomorrow night, actually, but yes. Lorenzo set his glass down and turned to face her. I received intelligence last night. Victor is hosting a meeting. Various business associates, some legitimate, most not. It's the best opportunity we'll have to catch him with his guard partially down. Partially down doesn't sound like very good odds. They're the best odds we're going to get. Lorenzo moved closer, and Emma could see the exhaustion in his face. The shadows under his eyes were deeper than before, and there was a tension in his jaw that spoke of sleepless hours spent planning. Victor doesn't make himself vulnerable often. This is our chance. Our chance, Emma repeated. You mean your chance? I mean the chance to end the threat against you and your brother, permanently. Emma finally took a sip of the brandy, feeling it burn down her throat. Marco's right, isn't he? This has become personal for you. Lorenzo didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window and pulled back the curtain, revealing the grounds bathed in early morning light. Guards were visible, patrolling in pairs, their movements precise and professional. When I was 23, Lorenzo said quietly, I watched my father die because he trusted the wrong person. Someone he thought was a friend. Someone who smiled while driving a knife between his ribs. Emma stayed silent, sensing this was something Lorenzo rarely spoke about. I learned a lesson that day, he continued. Trust no one. Keep everyone at arm's length. Never let anything become personal, because personal meant weakness, meant vulnerability. He turned to look at her. I've lived by that principle for 13 years. It's kept me alive, kept me powerful, kept me in control. And now? Emma prompted when he fell silent. And now there's you. Lorenzo's laugh was hollow. A woman I pulled from a wrecked car. Someone who shouldn't matter, who should be just another piece on the board. But you're not. Somehow, impossibly, you've become the exception to every rule I've ever made. Emma's breath caught. Lorenzo, I don't expect you to understand, he cut her off. I barely understand it myself. But Marco's right. This is personal. Victor threatened you, and that makes it unforgivable. He could offer me everything he owns, and I'd still end him for what he tried to do to you. The intensity in his voice made Emma's knees weak. She set down her brandy glass before she could drop it, her hands trembling. That's insane, she whispered. You barely know me. I know enough. Lorenzo crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, stopping just inches away. I know you raised your brother when you were barely more than a child yourself. I know you work double shifts and sacrifice your own needs to help others. I know you're strong and stubborn, and you don't back down even when you're terrified. And I know that when you look at me, you don't see a monster. You see a man. You are a man, Emma said. A dangerous, complicated man who probably does terrible things, but still a man. Is that what you tell yourself to justify this? Lorenzo reached out and traced her jawline with gentle fingers. Whatever this is becoming between us. Emma should deny it, should step back, should remind both of them that this was impossible. She was a nurse from Chicago. He was a crime boss. They existed in different worlds, and those worlds didn't mix. But when Lorenzo touched her, all of those rational thoughts dissolved like smoke. I don't know what this is, she admitted. All I know is that when you promise to come back, I believe you. And when you look at me like you are right now, I forget every reason why this is a terrible idea. It is a terrible idea, Lorenzo agreed. His other hand came up to cup her face, tilting it toward him. Possibly the worst I've ever had. Then why? He kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative, it was fierce and claiming, a statement of intent more than a question. Emma gasped against his mouth, and Lorenzo took advantage, deepening the kiss until she forgot how to breathe. Her injured ribs protested when she pressed against him, but Emma didn't care. She'd been running on empty for so long, working herself to exhaustion, shouldering burdens too heavy for one person, never letting herself want anything. And now here was this man offering her something she hadn't even known she was missing. Safety. Desire. The feeling of being chosen. Lorenzo's hand slid into her hair, careful of her healing head injury, but possessive nonetheless. Emma's good arm wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, and she felt him smile against her lips. You're going to hurt yourself, he murmured. Don't care. I do. He gentled the kiss, pulling back slightly. Your ribs need time to heal. I hate when you're sensible. That surprised a laugh out of him, genuine and warm. First time anyone's accused me of that. They stood there, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. Emma's heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with pain or fear. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, Lorenzo agreed. But he didn't let go of her, and Emma didn't pull away. A sharp knock on the door made them spring apart. Marco's voice came through the wood, carefully neutral. Lorenzo, you're needed in the security room. There's been a development. Lorenzo's expression shifted instantly from the man who'd just kissed her to the cold, calculating businessman. I'll be right there. He looked at Emma, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. Duty versus desire. Go, she said. I'm fine. We'll talk later. Will we? Or will you avoid me because this was a mistake? Lorenzo moved so quickly she barely saw him, one hand tangling in her hair again as he pulled her in for another kiss, this one brief but devastating. Not a mistake, he said against her lips. Never a mistake. But very, very complicated. Then he was gone, leaving Emma standing in his study with swollen lips and a racing heart, trying to process what had just happened. She'd kissed Lorenzo Vieri. Or he'd kissed her. Or they'd kissed each other. The specifics didn't matter. What mattered was that she wanted it to happen again, and that wanting terrified her almost as much as Victor's threats. Emma made her way back upstairs, hoping to avoid Dylan. No such luck. Her brother was waiting outside her room, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. Morning, Emma said weakly. Don't, Dylan said. Don't pretend I didn't just see you coming from Lorenzo's study. At dawn. Looking like that. Emma touched her lips self-consciously. Dylan, are you out of your mind? Dylan grabbed her arm, her good one, and pulled her into her room, closing the door behind them. Emma, he's a criminal, a mobster, the kind of guy who probably has a dozen bodies buried somewhere. You don't know that. I don't know that he doesn't, Dylan's voice rose. And neither do you. You've known him for 6 days. 6 days, and you're already, what, falling for him? Having some kind of Stockholm Syndrome breakdown? The accusation stung because it was too close to Emma's own fears. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, you're getting involved with a dangerous man who's keeping us prisoner. He's protecting us, Emma interrupted. There's a difference. Is there? Because we still can't leave. We're still trapped here playing house in his mansion while he plots to kill people. And now you're, what, kissing him? Falling in love with your captor? I'm not falling in love with him. But even as Emma said it, she wasn't sure it was true. Love was too strong a word for what she felt. But it was something powerful and terrifying and completely beyond her control. Dylan's expression softened slightly. You know I trust you. You've never steered me wrong. But this, I'm scared. I'm scared you're going to get hurt. Or worse. Emma pulled her brother into a hug, feeling him resist for a moment before melting against her. They stood there like they had 100 times before, Emma being the strong one, the protector. I'm scared too, she admitted quietly. But I also know that Lorenzo has kept his promises so far. He saved my life. He's keeping you safe. And when he says he'll come back from confronting Victor, I believe him. Why? Because he has something to come back to now. Emma pulled back to look at her brother. Me. Us. And I don't think he's used to having something worth coming back to. Dylan shook his head, but his expression was resigned. You're already in too deep, aren't you? Maybe. Emma managed a weak smile. Probably. But it's too late to change that now. Just promise me you'll be careful, that you won't let him break your heart. I promise to try. It was the best she could offer, and they both knew it. The rest of the day passed in anxious waiting. Lorenzo was closeted with his people, planning whatever was going to happen tomorrow night. Emma tried to distract herself with television, with books from Lorenzo's extensive library, with anything that would keep her from counting the hours until he went to face Victor. Dylan kept giving her worried looks but didn't say anything more. They ate lunch together in uncomfortable silence, both of them thinking about what was coming. It wasn't until evening that Lorenzo reappeared. He found Emma in the library, curled up in a window seat with a book she wasn't really reading. Hi, she said, setting the book aside. Hi. Lorenzo looked exhausted but wired, running on adrenaline and determination. Can we talk? Of course. He sat down across from her, and for a long moment he just looked at her, like he was memorizing her features, storing them away for later. Tomorrow night, he said finally, when I go after Victor, I need you to promise me something. What? If things go wrong, if Marco comes and tells you to run, you do it. No questions, no hesitation. You take Dylan and you run. Lorenzo. Promise me, Emma. His voice was fierce. Whatever's happening between us, whatever this is, it doesn't matter if you're dead. Promise me you'll save yourself. Emma reached out and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I promise. But only if you promise the same thing. If it goes bad, you get out. You come back. I already promised you that. Promise again. Lorenzo's laugh was strained. You're going to hold me to an impossible number of promises. Good. Then you'll have to keep them all. He pulled her closer, and Emma went willingly, settling against his chest despite the protest from her ribs. Lorenzo's arms wrapped around her, careful but secure, and Emma felt something in her chest loosen. This was insane. Completely, utterly insane. She was falling for a man who lived in a world of violence, who was about to walk into a deadly confrontation, who represented everything unstable and dangerous. But when he held her like this, Emma felt safer than she had in years. Tell me about after, she said quietly. After Victor is gone. What happens then? Then you and Dylan are free. You can go back to your lives, back to nursing, back to normal. Is that what you want? For us to leave? Lorenzo's arms tightened fractionally. What I want and what's best for you are two different things. Let me decide what's best for me. Emma, I'm serious. She pulled back to look at him. You don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide I'm better off without you just because your life is complicated. I've spent 6 years making hard decisions, surviving impossible situations. I think I can handle whatever comes next. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. Emma cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that whatever this is between us, I want to see where it goes. I'm saying that when Victor is gone and the danger is past, I don't want to walk away from you. And I'm saying that you don't get to make that decision for me. Lorenzo stared at her, and Emma saw a dozen emotions flicker across his face. Desire, fear, hope, resignation. Then he kissed her, slow and deep and full of things neither of them could say out loud. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "You're going to turn my whole world upside down," he murmured. "Good," Emma said. "Maybe your world needs it." They stayed like that until full dark fell outside the windows, wrapped around each other, stealing moments of peace before tomorrow's storm. Emma memorized the way Lorenzo smelled, the sound of his heartbeat, the feeling of being held like she was something precious. Tomorrow, he would face Victor. Tomorrow, everything could change. But tonight, they had this. And Emma was going to hold on to it with everything she had. The knock that came at midnight shattered the fragile peace they'd built. Emma had fallen asleep in Lorenzo's arms, still in the library, her head on his chest. She woke to find him already alert, his body tense. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Victor knows we're planning to move against him. He's moved up his timeline." Lorenzo was on his feet in an instant, carefully settling Emma back against the cushions. "How bad?" "Bad. He's sent people. They're asking questions about the Carter siblings in Chicago. Hospitals, police stations, known associates." Marco's eyes flicked to Emma, and he's put out word that he's looking for someone matching Miss Carter's description, offering a substantial reward for information. Emma's blood ran cold. "Dylan, is Dylan safe?" "Dylan is fine," Marco assured her. "Still in his room, completely secure. But Lorenzo, we need to move. Tonight. If we wait for tomorrow, Victor will come here," Lorenzo finished. "He's forcing our hand." "What does that mean?" Emma stood despite her aching ribs. "What are you going to do?" Lorenzo turned to her, and in his eyes, Emma saw the man she'd first met, cold, calculated, dangerous. The man who existed in a world of violence and made impossible decisions without hesitation. "It means," he said quietly, "that the game just changed, and I need to change with it." He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her into a fierce kiss that tasted like goodbye. "Stay in this house," he ordered. "Stay with Dylan. Marco's men will protect you. And Emma, remember your promise. If things go wrong, you run." Lorenzo, wait. But he was already moving, already shifting into the role he needed to play. At the door, he paused and looked back at her one last time. "I'm coming back," he said. "I promise you, Emma Carter. I'm coming back." Then he was gone, and Emma was left standing in the library with her heart in her throat and the taste of him still on her lips. Marco lingered a moment longer. "He'll be okay," he said, though Emma wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. "Lorenzo always comes back." "He has to," Emma whispered, "because I'm not ready to say goodbye." Marco's expression softened. "Then we'll make sure he doesn't have to." After he left, Emma sank back onto the window seat and stared out at the dark grounds. Somewhere out there, Lorenzo was heading into danger, into violence, into a confrontation that could end with him dead, and all Emma could do was wait. She thought about waking Dylan, about telling him what was happening, but what good would that do? He'd just worry, just pace and fret, and feel as helpless as she did. So instead, Emma sat in the darkness and made her own promises. Silent ones, fierce ones, desperate ones. "Come back to me. Come back alive. Come back whole. Come back." The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Emma watched the sun rise, painting the grounds in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscenely beautiful given the circumstances. She heard the guards change shifts, heard the normal sounds of the house waking up. But no word came. No update. No news. Dylan found her around 8, still in the library, still staring out the window. "Em, have you been here all night?" "Lorenzo went after Victor," Emma said without looking at her brother. "Last night, something changed. Victor found out about the plan, so Lorenzo had to move early." Dylan was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down beside her and took her hand. "He'll come back," Dylan said, echoing Marco's words. "He has to. Because if he doesn't, I'm going to have to deal with my big sister's broken heart, and I'm really not equipped for that." Despite everything, Emma smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best." They sat together as morning stretched into afternoon, waiting for news that didn't come. Maria brought food that neither of them ate. Dr. Chen checked Emma's injuries with professional efficiency and said nothing about the tears on her cheeks. And still, no word from Lorenzo. Emma was starting to think the worst. that something had gone wrong, that Victor had won, that Lorenzo's promises had been empty after all. When she heard it, vehicles, multiple vehicles, approaching fast, she ran to the window, ignoring the screaming pain in her ribs, and saw the gates opening. 3 black SUVs roared up the drive, moving with urgency but not panic. The first one screeched to a halt in front of the mansion, and Emma held her breath as the door opened. Lorenzo stepped out. He was alive, whole, walking under his own power. Emma's knees went weak with relief so profound it was almost painful. She turned from the window and ran, down the stairs, bursting through the front door just as Lorenzo reached the steps. He saw her and stopped, his expression shifting from exhaustion to something warm and bright. "You came back," Emma gasped, launching herself at him despite her injuries. "You came back." Lorenzo caught her, his arms wrapping around her and lifting her off her feet. "I promised, didn't I?" "What happened?" "Is Victor dead?" Lorenzo said simply. "It's over, Emma. The threat is gone. You're safe. You and Dylan both." Emma pulled back to look at him, searching his face. There was blood on his shirt. Not his, she hoped desperately, and a cut above his eyebrow. But he was alive. He was here. He'd kept his promise. "How?" she asked. "Later," Lorenzo said. "Right now I just need to hold you." So Emma let him. Right there on the front steps of his mansion, with his people watching and dawn breaking over the grounds, she let Lorenzo Vieri hold her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. And when he finally pulled back and kissed her, deep and claiming and full of promises about the future, Emma kissed him back with everything she had, because this was her choice, her decision, her life to live however she wanted. And right now she wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted whatever complicated, dangerous, impossible future they could build together. The nurse and the crime boss. The woman who saved lives and the man who took them. It shouldn't work. It was crazy to even try. But as Lorenzo swept her into his arms and carried her inside, both of them laughing despite the pain and exhaustion, Emma thought maybe crazy was exactly what she needed. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe and start living dangerously. And if there was anyone worth taking that risk for, it was the man who'd pulled her from a wrecked car and shown her that she was worth saving. Lorenzo set Emma down gently in the foyer, but he didn't let go of her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a small gesture that somehow grounded them both in the chaos of the moment. "You're hurt," Emma said, reaching up to touch the cut above his eyebrow. Her nurse's instincts kicked in despite the emotional whirlwind. "Let me clean that." "It's nothing. It's bleeding. And knowing you, there are probably other injuries you're not mentioning." She tugged on his hand. "Come on. Medical attention first, explanation second." Lorenzo smiled, tired but genuine. "Bossy. You have no idea." They made it halfway to the stairs before Dylan appeared, taking the steps 2 at a time. He stopped short when he saw Lorenzo, his expression warring between relief and residual anger. "You're alive," Dylan said flatly. "I am." "Good." Dylan crossed his arms. "Because my sister would have been destroyed if you weren't, and then I'd have to spend the rest of my life picking up the pieces." "Dylan," Emma started, but Lorenzo squeezed her hand. "You're right," he said to Dylan, "and I'm sorry for putting her through that, for putting both of you through this entire situation." The apology seemed to catch Dylan off guard. He blinked, some of the tension draining from his shoulders. "Is it really over? Victor's really dead?" "He is. I made sure of it personally." Lorenzo's voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing closing a business deal rather than ending a life. His organization is in chaos. Without him, they'll splinter into factions fighting each other. None of them will have the resources or motivation to come after you. "And the debt?" Emma asked. "Our father's debt?" "Died with Victor. Legally, it never existed anyway. Just an understanding between criminals. With Victor gone, that understanding is void." Lorenzo looked between them. "You're free. Both of you. You can go back to your lives whenever you're ready." The word should have brought relief. Instead, Emma felt her stomach drop. Go back to their lives. Back to the tiny apartment, the endless shifts, the constant struggle to make ends meet. Back to being invisible. Just another overworked nurse in a system that didn't care. Back to a world where Lorenzo Vieri didn't exist. What if we're not ready? Emma heard herself say. Lorenzo's eyes snapped to hers, surprise flickering across his face. Emma. I mean, Dylan probably is. He has classes, friends, a whole life waiting. Emma looked at her brother. Right? Dylan studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Yeah, I do, but what about you? Don't you want to go back to the hospital? To your patients? I don't know what I want, Emma admitted. It was the truth. A week ago, her entire existence had been mapped out. Work, survive, take care of Dylan, repeat. Now everything had shifted and she couldn't see the old path anymore. Couldn't see herself walking it, even if she tried. You're exhausted, Lorenzo said gently. We all are. Let's not make any decisions right now. He was giving her an out, Emma realized. A way to avoid this conversation, to pretend she hadn't just implied she wanted to stay in his world. But Emma had spent 6 years making practical decisions, safe decisions, decisions based on what she should want rather than what she actually wanted. Maybe it was time to stop being practical. Before she could say anything else, Marco appeared from one of the side hallways, his expression urgent. Lorenzo, we need to debrief. There are complications. Complications? Lorenzo's hand tightened on Emma's. Victor is dead. What complications? His second-in-command survived. Alexei Volkov. He's already making moves to consolidate power. Marco's eyes flicked to Emma and Dylan. And he knows about them, about why Victor targeted them in the first place. The bottom dropped out of Emma's world. You said it was over. You said we were safe. Victor is dead, Lorenzo said, his voice hard. That part is true. But Marco's right. The situation is more complex than I anticipated. Complex. Emma felt something cold settling in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite fear. Something worse. You promised me it would be over. You promised. I know what I promised. Lorenzo turned to Marco. Give me 10 minutes. Then we'll talk strategy. Marco nodded and disappeared. Lorenzo guided Emma toward his study, Dylan following close behind. Once inside with the door closed, Lorenzo moved to the sideboard and poured 3 glasses of whiskey, handing them out without asking. Drink, he ordered. You're both in shock. Emma drank, feeling the burn cut through the numbness. Explain, all of it. What happened last night, what's happening now, and what this Alexei person means for us. Lorenzo drained his glass and set it down with controlled precision. Victor was hosting a meeting at one of his warehouses on the south side. Marco's intelligence was accurate. Various business associates, some legitimate investors who didn't know what they were really investing in, some people who very much did. He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds. I brought 20 men. We waited until the meeting was in full swing, then we went in. Just walked in? Dylan asked. Nothing so crude. We cut the power first, disabled their security systems, neutralized the guards outside. Lorenzo's tone was clinical, detached. By the time we entered the warehouse, they were already off balance, confused. And then? Emma prompted when he fell silent. And then I killed Victor Kozlov. Lorenzo turned from the window, and Emma saw something dangerous in his eyes. Not quickly, not cleanly. I wanted him to know why he was dying. Wanted everyone in that room to understand what happens when someone threatens what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened Emma. Instead, it sent heat through her veins. Everyone saw? Everyone who mattered. The business associates, the investors, Victor's key people. Lorenzo's smile was sharp. I made sure they understood that Emma and Dylan Carter are under my protection, that anyone who touches them answers to me. Except Alexei didn't get the message, Dylan guessed. Alexei wasn't there. He was supposed to be, but he called in sick at the last minute. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Convenient timing. Now I'm wondering if he knew something was coming. Or if he set Victor up, Marco said from the doorway. All 3 of them jumped. None of them had heard him enter. Sorry. But Lorenzo, we need to consider the possibility that Alexei wanted Victor dead, that he's been planning a coup and we just did his dirty work for him. The implications hung in the air like poison. Emma felt sick. So Victor's death didn't solve anything. It just shuffled the deck. Not exactly. Lorenzo moved to his desk, pulling out a folder and spreading its contents across the surface. Emma saw photographs, documents, what looked like surveillance reports. Alexei is ambitious and smart, but he doesn't have Victor's connections. Doesn't have the same level of fear and respect. If we move quickly, we can eliminate him before he consolidates power. Eliminate him, Emma repeated. You mean kill him? Yes. The simple honesty was almost worse than a lie would have been. Emma looked at Lorenzo, really looked at him. The blood on his shirt, the exhaustion in his eyes, the casual way he discussed taking human lives. This was who he was, not the man who'd held her gently in the library, not the man who'd promised to come back. Those versions of Lorenzo existed, but so did this one. The killer, the crime boss, the man who solved problems with violence. I can't ask you to do this, Emma said quietly. Can't ask you to keep killing people because of my father's debts. Lorenzo crossed to her in 2 strides, taking her face in his hands. You're not asking, I'm choosing. There's a difference. Why? Emma's voice broke. Why choose this? Why choose us? We're nobody, Lorenzo. We're not worth... You're worth everything, Lorenzo interrupted fiercely. Don't you understand that yet? You're worth every risk, every enemy, every complication. Both of you. His eyes flicked to Dylan, then back to Emma. I've spent 13 years building an empire on the principle that nothing matters except power. That people are just pieces to be moved around a board. And then you crashed into my life, literally, and destroyed that entire philosophy. Tears were streaming down Emma's face now. You're going to get yourself killed protecting us. Probably. Lorenzo's thumb brushed away her tears. But what's the alternative? Let Alexei come after you? Send you back to Chicago to be hunted? Watch you walk away and spend the rest of my life wondering if you're safe? He shook his head. I'd rather die protecting you than live without you. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Emma sobbed. Agreed, Dylan said from somewhere to her left. Absolutely moronic. Lorenzo laughed, the sound ragged. Then we're all idiots together. Marco cleared his throat. Touching as this is, we really do need to plan. Alexei won't wait for us to sort out our feelings. Emma pulled back from Lorenzo, swiping at her eyes. What's the plan? The plan is for you and Dylan to stay here, protected, while I deal with Alexei, Lorenzo said. No. The word came from Dylan, surprising everyone. No, that's not good enough anymore. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? You said it yourself. People saw you kill Victor because of us, saw you claim us as yours. Dylan's voice was steadier than Emma had heard it in days. Which means Alexei knows exactly how to hurt you. He knows where to aim. Which is why you're staying here, where it's safe. Where it's safe until it's not, Dylan interrupted. Lorenzo, I'm not stupid. I've been watching your guards, listening to Marco's reports. This house is a fortress, but it's not impenetrable. If Alexei really wants us, he'll find a way. And when he does, we'll be sitting ducks. What are you suggesting? Lorenzo asked, his tone carefully neutral. Dylan looked at Emma, something passing between them in that look. The same wordless communication they'd shared since childhood. I'm suggesting we stop being the thing you have to protect. Start being part of the solution instead. Absolutely not, Emma said immediately. Dylan, you're 22 years old. You're not getting involved in what? The same world you're apparently ready to stay in? Dylan's expression was challenging. Em, you're not the only one who's been changed by this. I've spent a week watching you become someone different, someone stronger, someone who looks at a crime boss and sees a man worth fighting for. He turned to Lorenzo. You want to keep us safe? Teach us how to protect ourselves. Lorenzo studied Dylan with new appreciation. You're serious? Completely. I'm tired of being helpless, tired of being the kid sister has to worry about. Dylan straightened his shoulders. I want to learn, whatever you can teach me. Dylan? Emma started, but Lorenzo held up a hand. He's right, Lorenzo said. If you're going to be part of this world, and Emma, we both know you're not leaving, then you both need to know how to survive in it. Marco was nodding. Makes tactical sense. They're targets as long as your enemies know they matter to you. Better they know how to defend themselves. Emma looked between the 3 men, feeling control of the situation slipping away. This is insane. Dylan, you have college, a future. I have a future where people keep trying to kill me because of a debt I didn't know existed, Dylan countered. Or I have a future where I learn to fight back. I know which one I choose. Besides, Lorenzo added, it's not like I'm suggesting he join my organization. Just basic self-defense, situational awareness, how to recognize threats. He paused. Though if he wanted more extensive training, I could arrange that too. Don't encourage him, Emma snapped. I'm not encouraging. I'm offering options. Lorenzo's expression softened. Emma, I understand this isn't what you wanted for your brother. But he's right. The moment I claimed you both as mine, you became part of my world, whether you like it or not. The question isn't whether you're involved. It's whether you're involved and helpless or involved and capable. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to find a flaw in the logic. But she couldn't, because Lorenzo was right. They were in this now, all the way in, and being helpless hadn't protected them so far. Fine, she said finally, but I have conditions. Name them. Dylan finishes his degree. Online classes if necessary, but he finishes. And he doesn't get involved in anything illegal, training only. No jobs, no missions, no killing people. Emma's voice hardened. Those are non-negotiable. Lorenzo considered, then nodded. Agreed. Dylan gets trained in self-defense and security. He finishes his education, and he stays out of operational matters unless his life depends on it. Thank you, Dylan said quietly. Don't thank me yet. My training methods aren't gentle. Lorenzo turned to Marco. Get him set up with Santos. Basic hand-to-hand combat first, then we'll assess where to go from there. Marco nodded and gestured for Dylan to follow. At the door, Dylan paused and looked back at Emma. I'm going to be okay, Em. We both are. Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone with Lorenzo. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Lorenzo moved to the sideboard and poured 2 more whiskeys, pressing one into Emma's hand. You're angry with me, he observed. I don't know what I am. Emma sank into one of the leather chairs. Everything's moving so fast. A week ago, I was a nurse, that's all. Just a nurse trying to survive. And now I'm, what? The girlfriend of a crime boss? A target for Russian mobsters? Someone who watches her baby brother get trained to fight? You're Emma Carter, Lorenzo said simply. Same person you've always been, just in different circumstances. People don't stay the same when circumstances change this much. No, they don't. Lorenzo sat across from her. They become who they were always meant to be, stronger, fiercer, more themselves. Emma met his eyes. Is that what I'm becoming? I think you've always been this person. You just didn't have permission to show it before. The words settled something in Emma's chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe the woman who could stand up to Lorenzo, who could kiss a dangerous man and not flinch, who could watch her brother train for violence and not break. Maybe that woman had always been there, buried under exhaustion and responsibility and the weight of trying to be good. I'm still angry about Alexei, she said, about the fact that this isn't over. I know, I'm angry too. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. I wanted to give you safety, peace, a resolution. Instead, I've given you more danger. So what do? We end it, permanently, this time. Lorenzo leaned forward. But Emma, I need you to understand what that means. Alexei won't go down easy. There will be violence. People will die, and I can't promise it won't touch you. I know. Emma set down her glass. I've been thinking about that, about what it means to be with you, to be part of your world. And I realized something. What? I've spent 6 years in a hospital, watching people die despite everything I do to save them, watching families torn apart by disease and accidents and random chance. I chose nursing because I wanted to help, wanted to make a difference. Emma stood and moved to where Lorenzo sat, kneeling in front of him so they were eye to eye. But maybe there are different ways to help, different kinds of difference to make. Lorenzo's eyes searched her face. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you're going to build an empire, it should be one that does more than just accumulate power, one that actually helps people. Emma took his hands. You have resources, connections, money. What if we use that for something good? Good, Lorenzo repeated slowly. Emma, I'm not a good man. No, But you're a man who saved my life when you didn't have to, who protected my brother, who keeps his promises. Emma squeezed his hands. That's enough to build on. Lorenzo pulled her up into his lap, his arms wrapping around her. You're going to ruin me, aren't you? Probably. Is that okay? More than okay. He kissed her, slow and deep. I've been waiting my whole life to be ruined by the right person. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped around each other, stealing peace in the eye of the storm. Then Lorenzo's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He checked it, his expression darkening. Alexei made his move. He's claiming leadership of Victor's organization and putting out word that he's coming after the people responsible for Victor's death. Which means he's coming after you. Yes, but more than that, he's smart enough to know he can't take me directly, so he'll go after my weak points. Lorenzo's eyes met hers. He'll come after you and Dylan. Emma felt fear spike through her, but underneath it was something else, something harder, sharper. Let him try. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose. Emma, I'm serious. Let him try. But he's going to find out that I'm not some helpless victim waiting to be saved. Emma stood, feeling something crystallize inside her. I'm done running, Lorenzo. Done being afraid. If Alexei wants a war, then we'll give him one. The smile that spread across Lorenzo's face was fierce and proud. There she is. The woman I knew was hiding under all that exhaustion and fear. She's not hiding anymore. Emma pulled him to his feet. So what's the plan? How do we end this? Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, and Emma saw the war happening behind his eyes, the instinct to protect her warring with respect for what she was offering. Finally, respect won. We make Alexei come to us, he said. On our terms, on our ground. And when he does, we end him so completely that no one else will ever think about coming after you again. How long will that take? A week, maybe 2. Alexei needs time to consolidate his position, gather his forces. Lorenzo pulled out his phone. But we'll use that time too. Fortify defenses, gather intelligence, prepare. And what do I do during this time? Lorenzo's smile turned dangerous. You learn. If you're going to be part of this world, Emma, you need to understand it. Not just the violence, but the strategy, the politics, the way power really works. You'll teach me? I'll teach you everything I know. Lorenzo pulled her close. And when this is over, when Alexei is dead and your safety is secured, then we'll talk about what comes next, about how to use this empire for something more than just power. Emma leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of his body, the steady beat of his heart. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that whatever happens, we face it together. No more leaving me behind, no more making decisions for my own good. We're partners in this, or we're nothing. Lorenzo tipped her chin up, his dark eyes serious. Partners, he agreed, in everything, I promise. They sealed it with a kiss, deep and claiming and full of promise. And when they finally broke apart, Emma felt different, stronger, like she'd finally found the person she was always meant to be. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Lorenzo began teaching Emma about his world. She sat in on meetings with his advisors, learned about the various businesses and operations under his control, started to understand the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined his empire. Some of it made her uncomfortable. The casual violence, the moral ambiguity, the way Lorenzo could discuss someone's death with the same tone he'd used to discuss dinner plans. But Emma was surprised to find that most of it didn't shock her as much as it should have. Maybe she'd always known the world was darker than the hospital let her see. Maybe working with dying children had already shown her that life wasn't fair, that sometimes there were no good choices, only less terrible ones. Dylan threw himself into training with an intensity that both worried and impressed Emma. She watched him transform from her baby brother into someone harder, more focused. Santos, the ex-military fighter Lorenzo had assigned to train him, reported that Dylan was a natural, quick learner, good instincts, willing to do the work. He's got potential, Santos told Emma one afternoon while Dylan was in the gym, working through combinations on the heavy bag. Real potential. Another year of training, and he could be one of Lorenzo's top people. He's going back to college, Emma said firmly. Santos shrugged. If he wants to. But you should know, your brother's got a taste for this now, for being strong instead of weak. That's not something that goes away just because the immediate threat is over. Emma knew he was right. She could see it in Dylan's eyes, in the way he carried himself. Her little brother, who'd always been gentle, bookish, a little lost, he was finding himself in this violent world, and it terrified her as much as it filled her with pride. Her relationship with Lorenzo deepened in ways that had nothing to do with danger. They spent long evenings talking, learning each other's histories and dreams and fears. Lorenzo told her about his father's death, about building his empire from nothing, about the loneliness of always being the strongest person in the room. Emma told him about her mother's slow death, about raising Dylan, about the dreams she'd abandoned to survive, about feeling invisible, like she was just moving through the world without really living in it. "You're not invisible," Lorenzo said one night as they lay tangled together in his enormous bed. "You're the most visible thing in my life, the only thing that matters." Emma traced patterns on his chest, feeling the scars that marked his skin. "I'm falling in love with you. You know that, right?" Lorenzo's hand stilled in her hair. "Emma, I know it's fast. I know it's probably stupid, but it's true." She propped herself up to look at him. "I'm falling in love with a dangerous man who kills people and runs a criminal empire, and I'm not sorry about it." Lorenzo pulled her down for a kiss that was both tender and possessive. "I fell in love with you the moment I pulled you from that car. When you looked at me with those fierce eyes and refused to give up. I just didn't have the words for it until now." They made love slowly, carefully, mindful of Emma's healing ribs. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Emma felt more at home than she ever had in her entire life. The calm shattered on a Tuesday morning when Marco burst into the breakfast room, his expression grim. Alexei made his move. He grabbed one of our informants, tortured him for information about this place, about security protocols. Marco's eyes flicked to Emma and Dylan. "He knows everything. Guard rotations, entry points, weaknesses in our perimeter." Lorenzo was on his feet instantly. "When?" "We're not sure. The informant's body was found an hour ago. Could have been last night, could have been days ago." Marco pulled out his phone, showing Lorenzo something Emma couldn't see. "But Lorenzo, there's more. Alexei sent a message with the body. He says he's coming for the Carters, says he's going to finish what Victor started." Emma felt her blood run cold. Beside her, Dylan had gone pale, but his jaw was set in determination. "How long do we have?" Lorenzo asked, his voice deadly calm. "Unknown. Could be hours, could be days. But Lorenzo, we need to move them. Get them somewhere safe." "No." Emma stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "No more running. You said we'd face this together, Lorenzo. You promised." Lorenzo turned to her, and Emma saw fear in his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. "Emma, this is different. Alexei's not like Victor. He's younger, hungrier, more reckless. He'll burn this entire place down to get to you." "Then we make sure he burns with it," Emma said. The words surprised her, but she meant them. She was tired of being the victim, tired of being the thing Lorenzo had to protect. "You taught me about strategy, about how power works, so let's use it. Let Alexei come. We'll be ready." "She's right," Dylan said, standing beside his sister. "We're not running anymore. We end this. Today." Lorenzo looked between them, and Emma saw the moment he made his decision. The fear didn't leave his eyes, but it was joined by something else: pride, trust. "All right," he said, "then we prepare for war." The mansion transformed into a fortress within hours. Emma watched from the second-floor window as Lorenzo's people moved with military precision, reinforcing entry points, positioning armed guards at strategic locations, setting up surveillance equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie rather than a home. "This is really happening," Dylan said from beside her, his voice tight with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "We're actually going to fight." "We're going to survive," Emma corrected. She turned from the window to face her brother, seeing the boy he'd been, and the man he was becoming existing simultaneously in his features. "Dylan, if you want to leave, if you want Marco to take you somewhere safe, I won't think less of you. Would you leave if Lorenzo asked you to?" Emma didn't have to think about her answer. "No." "Then neither will I." Dylan's jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded Emma of their mother. "We're in this together. Team Carter. remember? Team Carter, Emma echoed, pulling him into a fierce hug. I love you, you know that? Love you too, Em, even when you're being terrifyingly brave. A knock interrupted them. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, and Emma's breath caught at the sight of him. He changed into dark tactical gear that made him look even more dangerous than usual, and he was wearing a shoulder holster with a gun that Emma tried very hard not to think about. We need to talk, he said. Strategy meeting in 10 minutes, both of you. The meeting took place in Lorenzo's study, where Marco had set up a large display screen showing the mansion's grounds from multiple angles. Santos was there, along with 3 other men Emma recognized as Lorenzo's key lieutenants. The room smelled of coffee and gun oil, and the tension was thick enough to taste. Alexei will come tonight, Marco said without preamble, pointing to the screen. Our remaining sources confirm he's gathered a force of at least 20 men, possibly more. He's planning a direct assault. Nothing subtle, nothing clever, just overwhelming force. He's counting on us being unprepared, Lorenzo said, on catching us off guard, which means we use that against him. How? Emma asked. All eyes turned to her, and she forced herself not to shrink under their scrutiny. She'd asked to be part of this. Time to prove she belonged. Lorenzo's expression softened slightly when he looked at her. We make it look like we're unprepared, like we're scrambling. Pull back half the perimeter guards, make the house look vulnerable. He turned to the screen. But we position our best shooters here, here, and here. Elevated positions with clear sight lines to the main approach. When Alexei's people come in thinking they have the advantage, we'll have them in a killing field. What about the house itself? Santos asked. If they breach the perimeter, they won't breach far, Lorenzo interrupted. But if they do, we have fallback positions. The study, the library, the master bedroom, all reinforced, all defensible. Emma and Dylan will be in the safe room in the basement. Reinforced steel door, separate ventilation system, escape tunnel that leads to the garage. No. Emma's voice was firm. I'm not hiding in a basement while you fight. Lorenzo's eyes flashed. Emma, you promised we'd face this together. You promised I wouldn't be left behind. Emma stood, moving to the display screen. I'm a nurse. I've dealt with trauma, with emergency situations, with keeping people alive when everything's falling apart. Put me somewhere I can be useful. The only place you'll be useful is somewhere safe, Lorenzo said, his voice hard. Actually, Marco interjected, she has a point. If we have wounded, and we will have wounded, we'll need someone with medical training. Doctor, Chen is good, but he can't be everywhere at once. Lorenzo's jaw worked. Emma could see him fighting himself, protective instincts warring with logic. Finally, he turned to Santos. Set up a triage station in the wine cellar. Reinforced walls, only one entry point, easy to defend. Emma can work from there. And me? Dylan asked. You stay with your sister, armed, trained enough to defend the position if it comes to that, but your primary job is to keep Emma safe. Lorenzo's eyes met Dylan's. Can you do that? Dylan straightened. Yes, sir. The formality in his voice made Emma's chest tighten. Her baby brother, preparing for war. When had they arrived at this moment? How had their lives twisted so far from normal that this felt like the only option? But looking at Lorenzo, at the fierce determination in his eyes, Emma knew the answer. This was the only option. Running wouldn't save them. Hiding wouldn't save them. The only way out was through. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Emma helped Dr. Chen stock the wine cellar with medical supplies, bandages, antibiotics, surgical tools, blood bags from Lorenzo's private stock. She tried not to think about how many injuries they were expecting, how much blood might be spilled. Dylan stayed close, his new Glock 19 holstered at his hip. Santos had drilled him relentlessly over the past 2 weeks, and Emma had to admit her brother handled the weapon with surprising confidence. But confidence and competence weren't the same as being ready to actually shoot someone. Have you thought about what it'll mean? Emma asked him quietly as they organized supplies. If you have to use that gun, actually pull the trigger? Dylan's hand stilled on the box of gauze he was unpacking. Every day since Santos started training me. Every single day. He looked at her. I don't want to kill anyone, Em, but if someone's trying to kill you, trying to kill Lorenzo, trying to hurt the people I care about, then yeah, I'll pull the trigger. Emma pulled him into another hug, this one tinged with sadness. Her brother had lost something in these past weeks, an innocence, a softness. But maybe he'd gained something too, strength, purpose, the ability to protect instead of just being protected. As evening fell, Lorenzo found Emma in the wine cellar making final preparations. He dismissed the guards with a gesture, giving them privacy. "You should eat something," he said, holding out a plate Maria had prepared. Sandwiches, fruit, things that could be eaten quickly. Combat rations, Emma thought distantly. "Not hungry." "Eat anyway. You'll need your strength." Lorenzo set the plate down and pulled Emma into his arms. "I meant what I said earlier, about wanting you in the safe room." "I know, but I meant what I said too." Emma looked up at him. "I can't hide while people die. Can't sit in a basement wondering if you're alive or dead. I need to be useful, Lorenzo. Need to do something." "You're already doing something. You're giving me a reason to make sure I survive this." Lorenzo's hand cupped her face. "Emma, if anything happens to you, it won't. You'll make sure of that." Emma rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring everything she felt into it. Love, fear, determination, hope. "We're going to get through this. And when we do, we're going to build something better, something that matters. Promise?" "Promise." Emma smiled against his lips. "I don't break my promises." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped around each other, stealing what might be their last peaceful moment. Then Lorenzo's phone buzzed, and reality crashed back. "They're moving," Marco's voice came through. "2 vehicles spotted 5 miles out, heading this way. ETA 15 minutes. Lorenzo's expression hardened, the tender man disappearing behind the mask of the warrior. "Stay here. Stay safe. And Emma, if things go wrong, if you hear the code word nightfall, you take Dylan and you run. Through the tunnel, to the garage, and you drive until you hit the Canadian border. Understood?" "Lorenzo, promise me." His grip on her shoulders tightened. "Promise me you'll run if I tell you to." Emma wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she'd never leave him, but she saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear he was trying so hard to hide. This was what she could give him, the knowledge that if he fell, she wouldn't die with him. "I promise," she whispered, "but you promise me something too. Promise me you'll come back, that this won't be goodbye." Lorenzo pulled her in for one more kiss, hard and claiming. "I'm coming back, Emma Carter. I swear it on everything I am. I'm coming back to you." Then he was gone, disappearing up the stairs to lead his people into battle. Emma stood alone in the wine cellar, surrounded by medical supplies, and prayed to a universe she wasn't sure was listening that she'd see him alive again. Dylan appeared moments later, his face pale but determined. "Everyone's in position. Marco says it's going to start soon." "Then we wait," Emma said, gesturing to the chairs Dr. Chen had set up. "And we hope we're not needed." But even as she said it, Emma knew they would be needed. This wasn't going to be clean or easy. People were going to die tonight. The only question was which people and how many. The first gunshot shattered the evening quiet exactly 17 minutes later. Emma's head snapped up, her nurse's instincts immediately calculating distance and direction. Close. Too close. Dylan was on his feet, his hand going to his gun. "Stay calm," Emma said, though her own heart was racing. "Remember your training, deep breaths." More gunshots followed, a rapid staccato that made Emma's teeth ache. She could hear shouting now, orders being barked in multiple languages. The battle had begun. "I should be up there," Dylan said, pacing like a caged animal. "Should be helping." "You're helping by being here, by keeping me safe so Lorenzo doesn't have to worry." Emma forced herself to sit, to project calm she didn't feel. "This is our job, Dylan. We hold this position. We treat the wounded. We survive." An explosion rocked the house, close enough that dust rained from the wine cellar ceiling. Emma grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, her medical training warring with the very human urge to panic. "Emma!" Dylan was at her side. "You okay?" "Fine. I'm fine." Emma took a shaky breath. That sounded like the East Wing, where Lorenzo said they'd probably try to breach. Which means the plan's working. They're going where we want them to. Dylan's voice was steadier than Emma felt. "We trust the plan. Trust Lorenzo. Trust Lorenzo." Emma clung to those words like a lifeline as the sounds of battle intensified above them. Gunfire, shouting, the crash of breaking glass. Each sound was a knife to her heart, imagining Lorenzo in the middle of it, imagining him hurt or dying or... No, she couldn't think like that. Lorenzo had survived 13 years in this world. He knew what he was doing. The wine cellar door burst open, making both Emma and Dylan jump. Marco stumbled through, his arm bleeding heavily, supporting another man Emma recognized as one of Lorenzo's guards. "We've got wounded," Marco gasped. "Emma, I need you." Emma's training took over, fear transforming into focus. She guided Marco to one of the chairs while Dylan helped the other man. "What happened?" "Alexei brought more men than we expected. 30, maybe 35. They're hitting us from multiple angles." Marco gritted his teeth as Emma cut away his sleeve, revealing a deep gash along his bicep. "Lorenzo's holding the main entrance. Santos has the east wing, but they're coming in hard, harder than we planned for." Emma cleaned the wound with hands that stayed steady through sheer force of will. The cut was deep but clean. A knife wound, not a bullet. "This needs stitches. Hold still." As she worked, more wounded started arriving. A guard with a bullet graze across his ribs. Another with a dislocated shoulder. Dr. Chen appeared, his shirt splattered with blood that Emma desperately hoped wasn't his own. "We're holding them," Dr. Chen said as he worked on a man with a leg wound. "Barely. But Lorenzo's plan is working. They're taking heavy casualties." "And our people?" Emma asked, not sure she wanted the answer. 3 dead. 7 wounded. Dr. Chen's expression was grim. "Could be worse. Probably will be before this is over." Emma forced herself to keep working, to not think about those 3 dead men. To not think about Lorenzo somewhere above them, fighting for his life. Fighting for her. Dylan was proving useful, helping move wounded, applying pressure to bleeding wounds, following Emma's instructions with steady hands. Her little brother, she thought with a surge of pride, was becoming someone she barely recognized. Someone strong. Another explosion, this one closer. The lights flickered, plunging them into darkness for a heart-stopping second before the emergency generator kicked in. "That was the West Wing," Marco said, his voice tight with pain. "They're trying to flank us." "Will it work?" Dylan asked. "Not if..." Marco's words were cut off by the sound of running footsteps on the stairs. Everyone tensed, weapons appearing in hands. Emma's heart hammered as she grabbed a scalpel. A pitiful weapon, but better than nothing. Santos burst through the door, his tactical vest scorched and his face covered in soot. "We need to evacuate this position. Now. Alexei's people breached the West Wing. They're heading for the cellar." "There are wounded here who can't be moved," Emma protested. "Then we defend this position," Dylan said, moving to stand between the door and his sister. His gun was in his hand, and Emma saw with a shock that there was blood on it. Her brother had already fired his weapon, had already crossed that line. "Get the wounded who can walk upstairs to the library," Santos ordered. "Everyone else, we hold here. Marco, can you shoot?" "With my left hand?" "Yeah." Marco grabbed his gun, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. Emma found herself backed against the far wall with 3 men who couldn't be moved, while Dylan, Santos, and Marco positioned themselves at the door. Dr. Chen was beside her, his expression calm in a way that spoke of experience with violence Emma couldn't imagine. "How many fights like this have you seen?" she asked him quietly. "Too many," Dr. Chen replied. "But Miss Carter, Lorenzo always wins. Always." Emma wanted to believe that, needed to believe that. The door exploded inward in a spray of splinters and smoke. Emma screamed, throwing herself over one of the wounded men as gunfire erupted. The noise was deafening, overwhelming. She couldn't see, couldn't think, could only hear the terrible sound of bullets and shouting and, "Dylan!" Emma's scream was lost in the chaos. Her brother was fighting, actually fighting, his gun barking as he fired at shapes in the smoke. Santos was beside him, moving with brutal efficiency, each shot finding a target. An unfamiliar man emerged from the smoke, his gun swinging toward Dylan. Emma moved without thinking, launching herself at him with the scalpel. The blade sank into his shoulder and he screamed, his gun going off wildly. Emma felt something hot graze her arm, but didn't stop, couldn't stop, some primal instinct taking over. Then Dylan was there, pulling her back, and the man was falling, Santos standing over him with a smoking gun. "Emma!" Dylan grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. "Are you hurt?" I don't know." Emma looked down at her arm, seeing blood, her blood. I'm okay." The smoke was clearing. 4 bodies lay in the doorway, none of them friendly. Santos was speaking rapidly into his radio, calling for backup. Marco was reloading his gun with shaking hands. "That was just the first wave," Santos said grimly. "They're testing our defenses, seeing where we're weak. The real assault is coming." As if to punctuate his words, the house shuddered with another explosion, closer this time. So close that Emma felt the heat of it through the walls. "We can't hold this position," Marco said. "Santos, we need to pull back to the library, consolidate our forces." "What about Lorenzo?" Emma demanded. "Where is he?" "Still holding the main entrance, but Marco's expression was painful to look at. "He told me if it came down to it, I was to get you and Dylan out, that you were the priority." "No." Emma's voice was steel. "I'm not leaving without him." "Emma!" "I said no." Emma's shout echoed in the confined space. "I don't care what Lorenzo told you. I'm not running. Not while he's still fighting." Dylan's hand found hers. "We stay together. All of us. That's non-negotiable." Santos looked between them, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this smart. We move the wounded to the library. It's more defensible. Then we find Lorenzo and we end this. Agreed?" "Agreed," Emma said. Moving the wounded was a nightmare of pain and logistics. Emma and Dr. Chen worked together, stabilizing the men who couldn't walk, while Dylan and Marco provided cover. Every step felt like it took an eternity, every sound in the house making Emma jump. They'd made it halfway to the library when they heard it, a voice Emma had never heard before, amplified by a megaphone, echoing through the mansion. "Lorenzo Vieri, I know you can hear me." The accent was thick, Russian, full of mockery. "Alexei, you killed my mentor, took what should have been mine, and now I'm going to take everything from you, starting with that pretty little nurse and her brother. I'm going to make you watch them die, Vieri, make you watch before I kill you too." Emma felt ice flood her veins. The taunting voice continued, describing in graphic detail what Alexei planned to do to them. Dylan's hand tightened on hers. Then another voice cut through the darkness. Lorenzo's voice, amplified from somewhere in the house, cold and deadly. "You'll have to get through me first, Alexei, and I promise you that's not going to happen." Emma's heart soared. He was alive. Lorenzo was alive and fighting. "Here's what's going to happen," Lorenzo continued. "You're going to call off your dogs and face me, one-on-one, or I'm going to kill every single one of them and then hunt you down like the coward you are. Your choice." Silence. Then Alexei's laugh, brittle and unhinged. "You want to fight me yourself? Fine. But when I win, your people surrender. The nurse and her brother are mine. And when I win," Lorenzo said, "you die, your organization collapses, and Emma and Dylan walk free. Those are my terms." "Lorenzo, no!" Emma tried to shout, but Santos clamped a hand over her mouth. "He knows what he's doing," Santos hissed in her ear. "This is strategy. He's drawing Alexei out, making him predictable." But strategy or not, Emma couldn't breathe. Lorenzo was going to fight Alexei alone, one-on-one, and if he lost, she couldn't think about that. Wouldn't think about that. "Main entrance," Marco said. "That's where they'll meet. Come on." They moved through the destroyed mansion like ghosts, staying in the shadows, avoiding the sounds of ongoing fighting. The house Emma had come to think of as beautiful was a ruin now. Walls pockmarked with bullets, furniture shattered, artwork destroyed. The cost of this war was written in every broken thing. They reached a position overlooking the main entrance just as Lorenzo and Alexei faced each other. Emma's breath caught at the sight of Lorenzo. He was covered in blood and soot, his tactical gear torn, but he stood straight and strong, alive. Alexei was younger than Emma expected, maybe early 30s, with cold blue eyes and a smile that made her skin crawl. He was holding a knife, the blade already stained red. "No guns?" Alexei mocked. "How noble." "No guns," Lorenzo agreed. He pulled a knife from his belt, the blade catching the light. "Just you and me, Alexei. The way it should be." They circled each other, and Emma felt Dylan tense beside her. Santos had his rifle trained on Alexei, but Marco grabbed the barrel. Not unless Lorenzo's losing. Those were his orders. We let him handle this. The first strike came fast. Alexei lunging with his knife, Lorenzo barely deflecting it. They moved in a deadly dance, blades flashing, each man trying to find an opening. Emma's hands clenched into fists, her nurse's instincts screaming at her to intervene, to stop this madness. But this wasn't the hospital. This was Lorenzo's world. And in this world, the only way out was through blood. Lorenzo landed the first real hit, his blade slicing across Alexei's ribs. The younger man stumbled back, surprised and angry. He retaliated with a wild slash that caught Lorenzo's shoulder, drawing a line of red across his tactical vest. They were both bleeding now, both wounded. The fight intensified, becoming more desperate. Alexei was faster, but Lorenzo was more experienced. Every move Lorenzo made was calculated, purposeful, while Alexei fought with the recklessness of youth. "He's gonna win," Dylan whispered. "Lorenzo's going to win." But even as he said it, Alexei pulled a second knife from his boot, a dirty trick that made Marco curse. Now Alexei had 2 blades to Lorenzo's 1, and the advantage shifted. Emma watched in horror as Alexei pressed his attack, forcing Lorenzo back. One blade caught Lorenzo's leg, making him stumble. The other slashed toward his throat. Lorenzo caught Alexei's wrist, twisting hard enough that Emma heard bones break even from her distance. Alexei screamed, dropping one knife. But with his other hand, he drove his remaining blade toward Lorenzo's heart. "No!" Emma's scream tore from her throat. Lorenzo twisted at the last second, the blade meant for his heart skidding off his tactical vest. But the movement left him open, and Alexei's knee caught him in the ribs with brutal force. Lorenzo went down. Alexei on top of him, the knife raised for a killing blow. 2 shots rang out, so close together they sounded like one. Alexei jerked, his eyes going wide with shock. He looked down at the blood blooming across his chest, then toppled sideways off Lorenzo. Emma's eyes snapped to Dylan. Her brother stood with his gun still raised, his expression frozen in shock. He'd fired. Both shots. He'd saved Lorenzo's life. "All forces, stand down!" Marco's voice boomed through the mansion. "Alexei is dead! Surrender or die!" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, Alexei's men began dropping their weapons. The fight was over. Emma was moving before she realized it, running down the stairs toward Lorenzo. He was sitting up, breathing hard, blood running from multiple wounds. But he was alive. He was alive. "Emma!" His voice was rough, pained. "You're supposed to be in the cellar. And you're supposed to not get stabbed," Emma shot back, tears streaming down her face as she dropped to her knees beside him. "Where are you hurt? Let me see." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're bleeding from at least 4 places." Emma's hands were already assessing his injuries, her training taking over. "Dr. Chen, I need supplies, now!" The next hours blurred together in a haze of adrenaline and medical procedures. Emma stitched Lorenzo's wounds in the library, her hands steady despite her racing heart. His leg wound was the worst, deep and bleeding heavily, but nothing vital had been hit. He'd be sore for weeks, but he'd survive. Dylan sat in the corner staring at his hands. Santos was with him, talking quietly. Emma knew her brother was processing what he'd done, taking a life, even to save another. That was a weight he'd carry forever. As dawn broke over the ruined mansion, Marco gave his final report. 11 of Alexei's men dead, 14 captured. Of Lorenzo's people, 5 dead, 12 wounded. The house was destroyed, but they'd won. "What happens now?" Emma asked as she finished bandaging Lorenzo's leg. "Now we rebuild," Lorenzo said. He pulled her close, wincing at the movement. "The threat is over, Emma. Really over this time. Alexei's organization will collapse without him. No one will come after you or Dylan again." "Promise?" "Promise." Lorenzo kissed her forehead. "You're free, both of you. You can go back to your lives if you want." Emma looked around the destroyed library, at the blood on the floor, at Dylan in the corner still processing his first kill. Their old lives felt like something from a dream now, distant and unreal. "What if we don't want to go back?" she asked quietly. Lorenzo pulled back to look at her. "Emma, I'm serious. What if we want to stay? Build something new here. Emma took his hands. You said I was going to ruin you, that I'd change everything. So let us. Let's take this empire you've built and use it for something that matters. What did you have in mind? Emma's mind was racing, ideas forming faster than she could speak them. A foundation. Using your resources to help people who fall through the cracks. Kids like Dylan and me, who lose their parents and have to raise themselves. Medical care for people who can't afford it. Protection for people running from dangerous situations. She squeezed his hands. You have power, Lorenzo. Let's use it for something good. Lorenzo stared at her, and Emma saw a dozen emotions flicker across his face. Then he smiled, really smiled, warm and genuine and full of hope. You really are going to ruin me, he said. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Lorenzo pulled her in for a kiss, gentle, despite the pain both of them were in. We'll build something better, together. Dylan appeared at Emma's side, his expression still haunted but determined. I'm in too. If you're staying, if you're doing this, I want to help. Are you sure? Emma asked. Dylan, what you did tonight, I know what I did. I'll have to live with it. Dylan's voice was steady. But I also know I saved someone worth saving. Saved my sister's happiness. That has to count for something, right? Emma pulled her brother into a fierce hug. It counts for everything. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Lorenzo's mansion was rebuilt, this time with even more security, but also with space designated for Emma's foundation. The Carter Foundation, they called it, in honor of the siblings who'd survived the impossible. Dylan went back to school, taking online classes while helping Emma organize the foundation. He was quieter now, more serious, but Santos reported he continued his training. Emma knew her brother would never be the carefree kid he'd been, but maybe that was okay. Maybe they'd both become who they needed to be. Lorenzo slowly transitioned his business away from the darkest corners of his empire. Not everything. Emma wasn't naive enough to think he could go completely legitimate, but enough. Enough to sleep at night. Enough to build something that mattered. 6 months after the night Alexei died, Emma stood in the newly completed foundation building, watching as the first clients walked through the doors. A single mother fleeing an abusive relationship, a teenager who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go, a man who needed medical care but had no insurance. You did this, Lorenzo said from beside her. He walked with a slight limp now, a permanent reminder of the knife wound in his leg. But he was alive. They were all alive. We did this, Emma corrected. She leaned into him, feeling his arm wrap around her waist. Together. Together, Lorenzo agreed. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Which is why I wanted to ask you something. Emma's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. Simple but elegant, like everything Lorenzo chose for her. Emma Carter, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you? Emma looked at the ring, at Lorenzo, at the foundation they'd built together, at Dylan across the room, helping register new clients, at the life they'd carved out of violence and danger and impossible choices. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Lorenzo slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, and Emma felt something settle in her chest. This was home. Not the mansion, not the foundation, but this. Lorenzo's arms around her, Dylan safe and whole, a future full of purpose and meaning. The wedding took place 3 months later in the mansion's restored gardens. It was small, just the people who mattered. Dylan stood as Emma's man of honor, his suit crisp and his smile genuine. Marco served as Lorenzo's best man, his arm fully healed from the fight. As Emma walked down the makeshift aisle, she thought about the woman she'd been just a year ago. The exhausted nurse, the invisible sister, the woman who'd believed she had nothing left to lose. That woman had died in a car crash on a dark highway, and from her ashes had risen someone stronger, someone who could look at darkness and choose light, someone who could love a dangerous man and make him want to be better. I love you, Lorenzo said as they exchanged vows, his dark eyes bright with emotion. You saved me, Emma. In every way a person can be saved. You saved me too, Emma replied, tears streaming down her face. And now we get to save each other, every day for the rest of our lives." They sealed their promises with a kiss, and Emma felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She was Emma Vieri now, wife, philanthropist, survivor, partner to a man who'd once lived only for power, but now lived for love. The foundation flourished under their combined leadership. In the first year alone, they helped 300 people escape dangerous situations, provided medical care to over 1,000 uninsured patients, and established a scholarship fund for kids like Emma and Dylan, orphans trying to build futures from nothing. Dylan graduated with honors and surprised everyone by applying to law school. "Someone needs to make sure this foundation stays on the right side of legal," he joked. But Emma knew the truth. Her brother had seen the gray areas between right and wrong, had lived in them, and now he wanted to understand how to navigate them properly. Lorenzo's empire continued, but it evolved. The violence didn't disappear entirely. Their world was too dark for that, but it became more selective, more purposeful. Protection instead of exploitation, justice instead of revenge. 2 years after their wedding, Emma stood in the nursery of their restored mansion, rocking a tiny baby girl who had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Sofia Vieri, named for Lorenzo's mother, who died when he was young. "She's beautiful," Dylan said from the doorway. Her brother was taller now, broader, law school having somehow added physical weight to match the emotional weight he'd carried since that night in the wine cellar. "She looks like you." "She looks like trouble," Emma corrected with a laugh. "Like she's going to turn this whole empire upside down." "Good. It needs it." Dylan moved into the room, gently touching his niece's tiny hand. "You know, I've been thinking about that night, about everything that happened." "Yeah? I used to think Dad ruined us, that his debts and his drinking destroyed our lives before we even had a chance." Dylan's voice was quiet. "But maybe he gave us something too, a chance to become more than we would have been, to find strength we didn't know we had." Emma thought about that as she looked down at her sleeping daughter. The woman she'd been before the crash never would have imagined this life. Married to a crime boss, running a foundation, mother to a child who'd grow up in a world of danger and beauty mixed together. But she wouldn't change it, wouldn't go back to being invisible, to being safe and small and unfulfilled. "We're survivors," Emma said finally. "Both of us. And now we get to teach her to be one too." "Survivor and revolutionary," Dylan corrected. "Look at what you've built, Em. The foundation, the changes in Lorenzo's organization, the lives you've saved. You didn't just survive, you transformed everything you touched." Emma looked around the nursery, at the expensive furniture, at the guards visible through the window, at the reality of the life she'd chosen. Dangerous, yes. Complicated, absolutely, but hers. Truly, completely hers. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted but happy. He'd been in meetings all day, consolidating the last of Victor's former territory, ensuring no one else would rise to challenge them. But the moment he saw Emma and Sofia, his expression softened into something tender. "How are my girls?" he asked, crossing to kiss Emma and gently touch Sofia's head. "Perfect," Emma said. "We're perfect." And it was true, not in the simple, uncomplicated way Emma had once dreamed of, but in a deeper, more meaningful way. They were perfect because they'd fought for this, because they'd chosen each other despite every reason not to, because they'd taken violence and danger and impossible odds and turned them into something beautiful. 5 years after the night she'd crashed on that dark highway, Emma Carter Vieri stood on the balcony of her home, watching the sun set over the grounds. Dylan was in the library with Sofia, reading her stories about princesses who saved themselves. Lorenzo was in his study, planning the foundation's expansion into 3 new cities. Emma thought about the woman she'd been, driving home exhausted and alone, believing she had nothing left to live for. She thought about the crash, the darkness, the moment she'd given up hope. And then she thought about Lorenzo's hand pulling her from the wreckage, not just from the car, but from the half-life she'd been living, pulling her into danger, yes, but also into purpose, into love, into the fullness of being truly, completely alive. "Thank you," Emma whispered to the universe, to fate, to whatever force had put Lorenzo on that highway at exactly the right moment. "Thank you for the crash. Thank you for the danger. Thank you for giving me a reason to become who I was always meant to be. Behind her, she heard Lorenzo's footsteps, felt his arms wrap around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. They stood together as darkness fell, watching the lights of their empire spread out before them, an empire built on love as much as power, on protection as much as profit, on the simple truth that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is open your heart to the impossible. Emma had opened her heart, had let herself fall for a man she should have feared, had chosen danger over safety, complexity over simplicity, truth over comfort. And in return, she'd received everything she'd never known she needed, a partner who saw her strength, a purpose that mattered, a family bound not by blood but by choice, a life that was messy and difficult and absolutely, perfectly hers. "I love you," Lorenzo murmured against her hair. "I love you too," Emma replied. And as the last light faded from the sky, Emma smiled, because she knew with absolute certainty that this was her happy ending, not the fairy tale kind where everything was simple and safe, but the real kind, the earned kind, the kind that came from surviving the darkness and choosing to build something beautiful from the ashes, the kind that came from a nurse and a crime boss meeting on a dark highway and deciding, against all logic and reason, that they were worth fighting for, the kind that lasted forever.